Hey guys, welcome back to our channel, as you seen in title and thumbnail. In this video we are going to see, what if Deku had time manipulation quirk. This is part 1, and for more comment down your thoughts and like share, also check out my Patreon to support me. All details in description. Scene 1, the boy who counts seconds. Izuku Midoriya had always unted time like it was a thing you could hold. Not the normal way. Not birthdays, or school bells, or the way people sighed through long classes and said, finally when the day was over. Izuku counted time in moments. 3 seconds to notice danger. 2 seconds to decide whether to run or help. 1 second to regret hesitating. He wrote those seconds down sometimes, tiny notes in the margins of his hero analysis notebooks. He'd circle them like they were sacred. 3.2 seconds, average reaction time for an adult under stress. 0.7 seconds, the gap between a villain's wind-up and the first strike. 1.4 seconds, the time a person holds their breath before panic takes over. He didn't know why he did it. Maybe because the world had always made him feel late, like he was born a step behind everyone else. Born quirkless. That word had followed him through his childhood like a shadow that didn't belong to him. It wasn't even an insult half the time, just a label. A clinical stamp on a file. A quiet fact people used to decide what you were worth. His mom tried, really tried, to make it softer. You can still be amazing, she would say, eyes glossy, voice too sweet, as if sweetness could coat the sharpness of reality. Izuku believed her, at least, he tried to. He clung to that belief the way someone clings to a railing when the stairs are slippery. In the morning, he stood in front of his mirror and rehearsed his face. Not a smile, not confidence, just neutral, something that wouldn't invite trouble. His All Might poster stared down from the wall like a promise. A bright grin, a raised fist, a world where strength meant safety. Izuku adjusted his tie, tucked his notebook into his bag, and whispered the same sentence he'd whispered 1,000 times. Today, I'll be useful. He didn't know that time was listening. Scene 2, a small cruelty, repeated. The hallway outside his classroom smelled like dust and old lunch bread. The day was normal in the way a bruise is normal, unremarkable unless you touched it. Izuku slid his shoes into the row, changed into indoor slippers, and kept his head down. The usual strategy, be quiet, be small, be uninteresting. It didn't work. Oi, Deku. Hat voice made something inside Izuku tense automatically, like his muscles had memorized fear. Bakugo Katsuki leaned against the wall with 2 other boys, hands in his pockets, expression lazy and sharp at the same time. He wasn't yelling today. That almost made it worse. Quiet cruelty had confidence behind it. Izuku swallowed. Gee, good morning, Kachan. Bakugo's eyes flicked down to Izuku's bag. What's that? Izuku's hands tightened on the strap. Just notes. Notes, Bakugo repeated, and the word became an insult. He stepped forward, too close, too fast. Izuku knew that distance. He'd studied it unconsciously for years. 1 step closer meant Bakugo was deciding whether he wanted a reaction. Bakugo reached out and snatched the top notebook, flipping it open with a thumb. Pages filled with cramped handwriting and diagrams, hero quirks, combat scenarios, rescue tactics. He skimmed and snorted. You're still doing this? Izuku's face went hot. It's just, I like pretending. Bakugo snapped the notebook shut. You're quirkless. You're not a hero. The hallway felt like it had shrunk. Students passed by, pretending not to see. That was the other rule of their world, don't get involved. Time moved safer for people who didn't interfere. Bakugo tossed the notebook back, not into Izuku's hands, but down at his feet. The notebook hit the floor with a soft slap. For a second, Izuku stared at it like it was a wounded thing. Then he bent down to pick it up. And that's when the shove happened. Not a full punch. Not a dramatic attack. Just a careless push from behind. A quick, Ian flick of power meant to remind him of his place. Izuku's foot slipped. He tipped forward. His shoulder clipped the edge of a desk. His knee struck the floor. Pain flared bright and sudden, and with it came something colder than pain. A weird silence in his ears. A pressure behind his eyes. And the world stuttered. Scene 3, 7 seconds back. Izuku blinked. The desk was not in front of him. He was standing. He was upright. He hadn't fallen. His notebook was still in Bakugo's hand. Time didn't rewind like a video. It wasn't smooth. It wasn't gentle. It was like reality had grabbed him by the collar and yanked him backward through a narrow crack. His stomach lurched like he'd been dropped from a height. His vision swam for half a heartbeat. Then everything snapped into place. Bakugo's thumb was still on the notebook page. Bakugo's mouth was half open, mid-sentence, shaping the same word. "You're still doing this." Izuku froze. He knew those exact syllables before they landed. A cold sweat broke on his skin. He heard his own heartbeat like a countdown. 1, 2. Bakugo tossed the notebook. Izuku watched it fall. Watched the exact angle. Watched the exact spin. The notebook hit the floor with the same soft slap. His body screamed at him. This already happened. He reacted before thinking. He moved half a step to the right. Just a tiny shift. The shove came, same careless push from behind. But this time, his foot didn't slip. The pressure passed through him like a wave that missed the shore by inches. Bakugo's hand jerked back slightly in surprise, not because Izuku had fought him, but because Izuku hadn't fallen. For a second, the hallway went quiet. Bakugo stared. What? Izuku's breath came too fast. His hands were shaking. He looked down at the notebook at his feet. It was real. Everything was real. But it was repeated. He hadn't imagined the fall. He could still feel the phantom pain in his knee and shoulder, like bruises from a life that had been erased. His mouth worked soundlessly. He whispered. Bakugo scowled like he hated not understanding something. "Don't get weird on me, Deku." Izuku didn't answer. He picked up his notebook with trembling hands and stepped back. His thoughts were a stampede. "I fell. No, I didn't. I did. I remember it. But it's not happening now." His vision flickered at the edges. The hallway seemed too bright. The fluorescent tea lights hummed like they were mocking him. And then it hit him, the biggest, most terrifying realization. He could remember both. He had two sets of memories layered inside his skull like transparent pages stacked imperfectly. One where he fell, one where he didn't. He backed into the classroom and sat down too hard. His fingers clutched the notebook like it was a life preserver. For the first time in his life, Izuku Midoriya felt something that wasn't hope or fear. He felt power. And it scared him more than Bakugo ever had. Scene 4, the aftertaste of time. The bell rang. Class began. Teachers talked. Chalk scraped against the board. Izuku heard none of it. His mind replayed the moment on loop, but not like obsession, like analysis. His thoughts were frantic and precise at the same time. How far back was it? How did it trigger? Did anyone else notice? He glanced around. No one was staring at him like he'd performed a miracle. No one looked confused. Bakugo was already bored again, tapping his pen like nothing had happened. That was wrong. It had been big. It had been impossible. But to everyone else, time hadn't shattered. Only to him. A hot sting touched his upper lip. Izuku raised his hand and saw red on his fingers. Blood. Not a lot. Just enough to make his stomach twist. He quickly wiped it with his sleeve before anyone noticed. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Tain his HEA." D whispered, except he didn't know those words yet. He only knew his body felt like he'd sprinted up 10 flights of stairs and then been spun in a chair. At lunch, he barely ate. Food tasted like paper. He drank water and it sat heavy in his gut. The more he tried to focus, the more the world felt delayed. Like his senses were slightly out of sync with reality. When someone laughed across the room, the sound reached him a fraction too late. When a chair scraped, his eyes jerked toward it before the noise arrived. It was subtle, but Izuku noticed subtle things. That was his curse and his talent. He kept thinking, if I can do that again. And immediately after, if I do that again, will it hurt more? The day ended. He walked home with his bag tight against his side, notebook clutched inside Lee. It might jump out and scream the truth. Every step felt like stepping across thin ice. Scene 5, a rulebook for the impossible. His room was the safest place he knew, not because it was strong, but because it was his. No one touched his things here. No one laughed here. The air smelled like paper and old posters and the faint sweetness of his mom's laundry detergent. Izuku locked his door. Then he did something he'd never done before. He pulled the curtains closed. It made the room dim and private, like a secret. His All Might poster watched him in the half light, grin frozen forever at the peak of certainty. Izuku placed his notebook on the desk and stared at it. This notebook was filled with observations about heroes. About quirks. About fights. It had never been about him. Now, it had to be. He opened to a blank page and wrote a title with a shaking hand. Unknown quirk, time. He stared at the words until they looked unreal. Then he forced himself to breathe. He wrote. Trigger, pain plus shock. Fear, fell, then didn't. Closing parenthesis. Effect, rewind, reset, about 7 seconds. Range, unknown, only me, space around me. Cost, nosebleed, dizziness, double memory. He paused, pen hovering. The pen slipped from his fingers. It fell. Ink glinted on the barrel as it spun. Izuku's heart jumped. Perfect test. He reached out, grabbed the pen midair, and whispered, without meaning to, go back. Nothing happened. He blinked, confused. He tried again, louder, voice cracking. Go back. Still nothing. He felt ridiculous. Like a kid playing pretend. Then, as if angry at him for demanding it, the world suddenly tilted. The desk edges warped for a fraction of a second. Izuku's stomach dropped. And the pen was back in his fingers, unfallen. He gasped so sharply his chest hurt. He'd done it. Not as cleanly as the first time. Not automatically. It had resisted. He stared at the pen like it was a snake. His breath puffed white in the cool air. I did that. He set the pen down carefully this time. He tried again, smaller. Dropped it. Watched it fall. Let it hit the desk. Then, quietly, go back. The world pulled, like a rubber band snapping. The pen jumped back to his fingertips. Izuku winced, pressing his palm to his forehead. A migraine bloomed instantly, like a bruise behind his eyes. He staggered back and sat on his bed, breathing hard. So it worked. And it hurt. He was trembling. But his eyes were bright, wide with the kind of terror that looks a lot like wonder. He wrote a new line in the notebook with messy handwriting. Rule 1. It's easier when it's accidental. Rule 2. Doing it on purpose hurts more. Rule 3. The more I do it, the worse the aftereffects. His pen hovered again. He wrote. Rule 4. Only I remember. He swallowed, throat tight. Because that was the loneliest part. If he had the power to rewrite moments, then he was the only witness to the moments he erased. The only one carrying the weight of lives that almost happened. A slow, sick thought rose in his mind like a bubble in dark water. If I'd rewound 7 seconds today, could I rewind bigger things tomorrow? Could he rewind mistakes? Could he rewind injuries? Could he rewind deaths? The thought was so huge it made his hands shake again. He looked at his reflection in the dark window, green hair slightly messy, eyes too wide, face pale. A boy who had always been powerless. A boy who had just tugged on the fabric of reality like it was a loose thread. He whispered, voice barely there. I just lived that. And somewhere deep in his skull, time answered with a cold, patient silence, as if it had been waiting for him to notice it all along. Izuku's first mistake was thinking time would behave if he treated it like science. The next morning, he woke up with dry, deep blood on his sleeve and a dull ache behind his eyes, like someone had pressed a thumb into his skull and left it there overnight. His room looked normal. His world didn't. He sat at his desk, pulled out a cheap stopwatch from a drawer, and placed it beside his notebook like a witness. Unknown quirk, time, stared back at him from the page. He swallowed, then wrote a new heading. Test 1. Rewind range plus duration. His fingers trembled as he picked up his pen. Okay, he whispered to himself, because if he didn't narrate it, he thought he might float away. Okay. Simple. Small. Controlled. He held the pen over the desk. Dropped it. It fell, hit the wood, rolled once. Izuku hit the stopwatch. 0 minutes 1 second and 13 milliseconds. He stared at the pen like it might bite him. Then, very softly, like he was speaking to an animal that scared him. Go back. The world jerked. Not smoothly. Not gently. A hard snap, like reality had been pulled backward by a hook. The stopwatch flashed in his vision. The pen was back in his fingers. Izuku inhaled sharply and immediately regretted it. Pain spiked behind his eyes. He slammed a palm to his forehead, breathing hard through his nose. The stopwatch still read 0 minutes 1 second and 13 milliseconds. It didn't reset, he muttered. He blinked. Looked again. Time rewound, but the stopwatch, an external measure, didn't care. It kept moving forward like a smug little liar. So the rewind wasn't affecting everything. It was selective, local, anchored to him. Izuku's pen hovered over his notebook and he wrote with shaky urgency. Rewind does not reset stopwatch. Right pointing arrow. Time manipulation may be localized or perspective linked. My memory stays. World state changes. External counters may resist. He stared at the words until they stopped shaking on the page. Then he tried again. Drop. Stopwatch. Go back. Snap. Pain. By the third attempt, his hands were sweating and his stomach churned like he'd eaten something rotten. His body didn't just dislike the quirk, it resented it. And yet, it worked. Every time. A miracle that came with a bill. He wiped his nose again. No blood this time, but his vision kept doing something strange. Tiny micro flickers at the edges, like the world was blinking out of sync with itself. He wrote one more line. Slower now. Rule 5. Rewind is reliable. My body is not. Scene 2, the first freeze. He didn't try freezing time because he was brave. He tried it because he was curious in the way that got him hurt his entire life. Bathroom. Door locked. Faucet on low. A thin stream of water slid into the sink. Ordinary. Predictable. Safe. Izuku leaned close, watching droplets form at the tip, swell, and fall. Just a second, he whispered. Just 1 second. He lifted a hand over the falling droplet like he was trying to catch a firefly. Stop. Nothing. He frowned. See. Cheeks flushing with embarrassment even though he was alone. Then the droplet fell, and instead of splashing, it hung. Suspended midair. Perfect, round, trembling like a trapped bead of glass. Izuku's breath caught. The sound of the faucet became distant, muffled, as if someone had stuffed cotton into his ears. Even the hum of the house felt far away. His skin prickled like the air had turned electric. Oh my! The droplet vibrated. A faint shimmer, like heat haze, outlined a small bubble around it. A field. Izuku stared, mesmerized. Had it. The droplet shattered into a fine mist that didn't fall so much as gave up and dispersed. The moment the freeze broke, the faucet sound slammed back into full volume. The house noise returned. The world snapped into place. And Izuku stumbled. A wave of nausea rolled through him. His knees hit the bathroom tile with a sharp crack. His hands gripped the edge of the sink like it was the only thing holding him to the present. His vision tunneled. For half a second, he saw something that wasn't there. A second droplet, frozen beside the first. A ghost version of it. An afterimage of time that almost happened. Then it was gone. Izuku swallowed hard, tasting metal. Echo, he rasped, not knowing why that word came to him, only that it fit. He crawled to his notebook like it was a lifeline and scribbled with shaking hands. Freeze creates stop field, small bubble. Sound muffles inside. Perception change. Duration. Approximately 1 second, maybe less. Cost. Nausea, weakness, vision tunnel. Possible side effect. Echo afterimage, alternate droplet. He stared at the word echo until his eyes burned. Because if echoes could happen with water, what would happen with people? Scene 3, acceleration isn't free. By afternoon, Izuku was running on stubbornness and fear. Fear of the quirk. Fear of what it meant. Fear that if he didn't understand it, it would swallow him whole. So he tried accelerating instead, because it felt less like wreaking reality and more like cheating at homework. He sat at his desk with a textbook open, pencil ready. Just perception, he told himself. Just my perception. Make the world slower. He inhaled. And focused. Faster. The room didn't blur the way he expected. Instead, everything around him became thick. Heavy. Like the air had turned into syrup. The ticking clock on the wall slowed. His own heartbeat became loud, drawn out. Each pulse a deep drum. He looked down at the textbook. Words leapt into meaning faster than they should. His eyes scanned, and comprehension snapped into place like puzzle pieces clicking together. His hand moved, writing notes. Quick, efficient, almost too smooth. Izuku's mouth fell open in astonishment. I'm doing it. Then his stomach growled so violently he flinched. Heat rushed through his body like he'd been sprinting. Sweat broke across his neck. His fingers started to cramp. The acceleration dropped out of him all at once. The room returned to normal speed with a nauseating lurch. The clock resumed its tick-tick-tick like it had never slowed. Izuku slumped over his desk, breathing hard, skin cold and clammy. His eyes burned like he'd stared at the sun. He whispered, hoarse, "I'm burning through something. Not electricity. Not stamina the way people talked about stamina. Something deeper. Like his body had borrowed energy from tomorrow and now demanded payment today." He wrote it down anyway. Accelerate equals perception, training boost. Cost: extreme hunger plus overheating plus muscle strain. Possible limitation: short bursts only. He sat there for a long time, staring at his hands that had always been empty, now holding something impossible. Scene 4, Inko notices. He tried to act normal at dinner. He failed within 30 seconds. "Sweetie," his mom said gently, setting a bowl of rice in front of him, "you're very pale." "I'm fine," Izuku lied, the way he'd always lied when he didn't want her to worry. He shoveled food into his mouth like he hadn't eaten in days. His body demanded calories with terrifying insistence. It wasn't hunger, it was a furnace needing fuel. Inko's eyes narrowed. "You had a nosebleed yesterday," she said softly. "And today you're eating like you ran a marathon. Did something happen at school?" Izuku froze. Not with his quirk, with fear. His chopsticks hovered midair. He couldn't tell her. Not yet. How do you tell your mother that time is bending around your son like a broken halo? I think I might be getting sick," he said instead, because it was the closest safe answer. Inko head across the table and touched his forehead. "You're not hot," she murmured. Izuku forced a smile that probably looked more like pain. "I'm okay," he repeated. Inko didn't look convinced. She looked scared. And that made Izuku's chest tighten in a way no quirk side effect ever had. "Tomorrow," she decided, voice firm in that mother way that didn't allow arguing, "we'll go to the doctor. Just a checkup." Izuku's mouth went dry. The word doctor shouldn't have been terrifying. But all he could think was, what if they don't believe me? Or worse, what if they do? He nodded anyway, because he owed her honesty even when he couldn't give her the truth. "Okay," he whispered. Scene 5, a name for the impossible. That night, Izuku sat on his floor with his notebook open, the room dark except for the glow of his desk lamp. He stared at everything he'd written. Rewind. Stop field. Acceleration. Costs. Echoes. It didn't look like a quirk profile. It looked like a warning manual for a weapon that had chosen a child. He tapped his pen against the page, thinking hard. Every quirk had a name. Even if it was unofficial at first, a name gave it shape. Rules. Boundaries. Something you could hold in your mind without shaking. He wrote. Slowly. Quirk name temp, CHRONOSHIFT. The moment he finished the word, the air in the room felt tighter. Like time itself had heard him label it and decided to take him more seriously. He swallowed. Then he wrote beneath it. Rule 6. No using it on people. Not yet. Rule 7. No testing maximum rewind. Unknown consequences. Rule 8. If echoes appear, stop immediately. He hesitated. Then added one more line, small, cramped handwriting like a confession. Rule 9. I can't fix everything. The pen hovered. His hand shook. Because the temptation was already there. Creeping under the door of his mind like smoke. If he could rewind 7 seconds. One day he'd try 30. Then a minute. Then 5. And if he ever saw someone die in front of him. Izuku's throat tightened. He looked up at his All Might poster, at that frozen grin, that fist raised like certainty was easy. He whispered to the empty room, All Might, what do you do when you can change everything? The poster didn't answer. Time didn't answer. But somewhere outside, a siren wailed faintly in the distance, an ambulance, maybe, or police, cutting through the night. Izuku felt it then, a strange tug in his chest. Not pain, not fear, something like a hook catching the edge of the present. Like the world was about to demand his power in a real situation, whether he was ready or not. His lamp flickered once, just once, and for a fraction of a second, his shadow on the wall split into two, one leaning forward, one leaning back, before snapping back into a single shape. Izuku stared at it, breath held. Echo. He whispered again, and this time, the word didn't feel like a note. It felt like a threat. Scene 1, the alley where time learned teeth. The air outside Aldera Middle SCH. Wool always tasted like exhaust and old metal. Izuku walked home with his notebook pressed tight against his chest, like he could physically keep the day from reaching inside him. The sun was already low, spilling long shadows across the road, shadows that made everything look stretched, distorted, wrong. He tried not to think about chronoshift. That was a lie. He thought about it every second. The way his head still throbbed. The way his body felt like it had borrowed energy from tomorrow. The way his own shadow had split for a heartbeat last night. He took a breath and told himself the rules. No using it on people. Not yet. No pushing the limit. No doing anything stupid. A gust of wind pushed a crumpled wrapper across the sidewalk. Izuku flinched, then laughed weakly at himself. I'm jumpy. That's all. He turned into a quieter street changed. A shadow spilled across the pavement, too thick, too wet looking for a normal shadow. The temperature dropped, like the air itself had inhaled. Izuku's steps slowed. He heard it first, a wet, sliding sound. Like something crawling through a drain. Then he saw it. A humanoid shape, gray-brown sludge, eyes glinting like oil in sunlight, oozing out from between two buildings. Body stretching and reforming with every inch it moved. Izuku's throat locked. He knew this villain from the news. Not by name, but by feeling. A capture-escape type. Suffocation risk. High. The sludge villain tilted its head. And in a blink, it lunged. Izuku didn't have time to scream. Something cold and heavy slammed into his chest, wrapped around his throat, forced itself into his mouth. He choked. His hands grabbed at nothing solid, only slick, living muck. Panic detonated inside him. His vision tunneled. His mind, trained by years of fear and analysis, did one thing instinctively. It searched for a second chance. Go back. The world snapped. Scene 2, first death that didn't happen. Izuku was standing on the sidewalk again. Breathing. Air rushed into his lungs like a gift. His heart was screaming. The sludge villain was still between the buildings, still half emerged, still about to strike. But now Izuku knew. He stumbled backward, feet scrambling. The villain lunged. Izuku threw his bag forward like a shield, because it was the only thing his body could think of. The sludge hit the bag instead, splattering across fabric and books. Izuku ran. Not far, saint enough to round a corner and slam his back against a wall, panting so hard his ribs hurt. His hands shook violently. His eyes stung. He stared at the street and whispered, barely audible. I just. A sound like a laugh bubbled from the sludge as it peeled itself off his bag. It had been so fast. So close. If he hadn't rewound. Izuku swallowed bile. Rule 6. No using it on people. Not yet. But he already had. Even if it was only on himself, even if it was only to escape, time had wrapped itself around life and death like it was casual. His nose burned. He touched his upper lip. No blood yet, but pressure was building. The sludge villain oozed toward him again, slow and confident now, like it knew he was prey. Izuku's legs tensed to run. And then, a gust of wind blasted down the street. A force so huge it turned air into a wall. The sludge villain flew backward in a spray of muck, slammed into a building with a wet crackle, and splattered across bricks. Izuku blinked, stunned. A mass. Figure landed in the street like a thunderclap. Blonde hair. Blue suit. A presence that made the world feel safer just by existing in it. All Might. Izuku's breath caught, pure disbelief crashing NTO relief so hard his knees almost buckled. All Might pointed a finger. Villain. Surrender. The sludge villain shrieked, reforming, but it was already panicked, its confidence shattered by the sudden arrival of a symbol. Izuku watched, shaking, as All Might took control with practiced ease. A few moves. A few words. A small tornado of power that felt clean and bright. The villain was contained. All Might turned toward Izuku. Young man, are you hurt? Izuku opened his mouth, and the world stuttered again. Not from chronoshift, this time from realization. Because this was the part that was supposed to happen in the stories. All Might saving someone. All Might changing a life. All Might. Izuku's knees hit the ground anyway, not from injury, but from delayed terror. I'm okay, Izuku managed, voice thin. All Might's eyes softened. Good. You're very lucky I was nearby. Lucky. Izuku stared at his shaking hands. Lucky wasn't the word. Not when he'd already died once. Not when time had dragged him back by the collar. All Might moved closer, towering, and Izuku could feel the pressure of his presence, the weight of being seen by someone that big. All Might's smile stayed, but his gaze sharpened slightly. You, he said slowly. You reacted very quickly. Izuku's blood turned cold. All Might leaned closer as if listening to something. Almost like you knew where the villain would strike. Izuku's throat tightened. All Might's smile didn't break, but it wasn't as easy anymore. Do you have a quirk, young man? Izuku didn't answer fast enough. All Might's eyes flicked to Izuku's nose. To the faint redness gathering there. Then, before Izuku could speak, All Might straightened and clapped his hands together. Well, the police will take it from here. Stay safe on your way home. Izuku blinked. That was it. All Might took a step away, already moving, already shifting back into the flow of the street like a heroic tide. Izuku felt something crack in his chest. He wanted to call out. To beg. To tell him everything. But he didn't. Because the truth sat in Izuku's mouth like a dangerous stone. And because time, suddenly, felt like a secret he didn't deserve to share. All Might disappeared down the street with the villain contained. Izuku stayed on the pavement, shaking. And somewhere in his mind, Chronoshift hummed, quiet, patient, hungry. Scene 3, smoke, anger, and a familiar voice. The next day, the world seemed determined to pretend nothing had happened. School bell. Hallway noise. Bakugo's voice cutting through everything like a blade. Move, Bakugo snapped, shoulder checking someone. Izuku kept his head down. He tried to focus on normal life. He failed again. Because after school, when he stepped outside into the cool air, he heard yelling. A crowd had formed near the street. Not cheering, shouting. Izuku's stomach tightened as he pushed closer, heart starting to sprint. He saw a swirl of gray-brown sludge twisting in the air like a living storm. He saw a pro hero, one with a wide smile and average build, struggling, hands out, uncertain. And then Izuku saw the person at the center of it. Bakugo Katsuki. The sludge villain had him. Wrapped around his torso. Stuffed into his mouth. Pulling him down like quicksand. Bakugo's eyes were wide with fury and panic. And Izuku's blood turned to ice. It wasn't just that Bakugo was in danger. It was the way Izuku's mind snapped into a horrifying, immediate calculation. If I rewind enough, I can fix this. The thought came fast. Too fast. Like temptation had been waiting. Heroes shouted. The crowd screamed. Someone yelled for All Might. Bakugo struggled, but the villain tightened. Izuku felt Chronoshift stir inside him like a muscle flexing. His notebook strap cut into his palm. Rule 6. No using it on people. Bakugo's eyes flicked across the crowd. And for a split second, they met Izuku's. Bakugo's gaze wasn't pleading. It was furious. Like he couldn't believe Izuku was standing there. He couldn't believe anyone was just standing there. Something inside Izuku broke. He stepped forward. The crowd tried to grab him. Someone shouted, "Kid, don't." But Izuku was already moving. Because he had something no one else had. A second chance. A third. 100. He reached the edge of the sludge storm. His breath hitched. His hands raised. And he made the decision that would define him. Stop. Scene 4, Freeze Field. Broken courage. The air around the villain tightened. A shimmer bloomed, small, trembling, like heat haze catching sunlight. For half a second, the swirling sludge slowed. Not fully frozen, but enough. Enough that Bakugo's head tilted, just slightly, as the pressure eased for a breath. Bakugo coughed, one harsh gulp of air. Izuku's eyes widened. It worked. The hero closest to them lunged, trying to capitalize, but the sludge snapped back faster than the hero could react. The freeze collapsed. Izuku's head exploded with pain. He staggered. The world tilted. A ghost image flashed, Bakugo's face, but wrong. Like a different expression layered over the real one. An echo. Izuku bit down a cry. He forced his legs to move, forced his mind to stay present. He had maybe seconds adapted. He could feel it, the sludge shifting, learning. Izuku grabbed a rock from the ground, something small, stupid, desperate. He hurled it at the sludge. It hit uselessly. Bakugo snarled through the muck, eyes furious. The villain laughed. A child. You'll save him. Izuku's lungs burned. The crowd screamed. The pro-heroes hesitated, afraid of hurting Bakugo. Izuku understood that fear, and then time offered him a solution like a knife offered a clean cut. Rewind. Do it again. Optimize. Find the perfect sequence. A perfect outcome. Izuku's voice shook. Go back. The world snapped. Scene 5, the loop spiral. Izuku blinked. He was half a step farther back. The rock was still in his hand. Bakugo was still trapped. The crowd was still screaming. But Izuku's heart was now a war drum. He tried again. Freeze the sludge for 1 second, throw the rock, create space, let the hero strike. It almost worked. Almost. But the villain shifted. Wrapped tighter. Bakugo choked. Izuku's nose bled. Warm red slid down his lip. He didn't have time to wipe it. Go back. Snap. Again. This time he froze the villain a half second earlier. This time he screamed at the hero to grab Bakugo's arm at the exact moment the sludge loosened. The hero moved, but hesitated. Fear. Bakugo's eyes rolled, just for a heartbeat. Izuku's chest seized. Go back. Snap. Again. The world became a nightmare of repetition. Not identical, never identical, because Izuku changed tiny things each time. A step left. A shout sooner. A rock thrown at a different angle. A freeze bubble placed tighter. Each attempt carved new strain into his body. His vision flickered at the edges. Echoes multiplied. Ghost versions of Bakugo coughing, falling, gasping. Ghost versions of heroes yelling different words. Ghost versions of Izuku himself, his shadow splitting. Overlapping, tugging at the present like desperate hands. He tasted blood constantly now. His stomach churned. His limbs felt heavy, like he was dragging himself through wet sand. And the worst part was that Bakugo started looking at him differently. In one loop, Bakugo's eyes widened like he recognized something. In another, Bakugo flinched as if he'd already been hurt in a way he couldn't explain. Deja vu. Fragments. Like the timeline was bleeding into him. Izuku realized, with horror, that he might be dragging Bakugo through the edge of his rewinds. That he might be sharing the burden without meaning to. Stop, Izuku whispered, voice cracking, not as a command but as a plea to time itself. Please, stop. The villain tightened again. Bakugo's eyes met his. And this time there was something in them that wasn't just anger. It was fear. A raw, human fear. Izuku's chest burned. He made a choice in the middle of his own collapsing loops. No more chasing perfect. Just one clean opening. One moment. One breath. He lifted his trembling hands and poured everything he had into the smallest, sharpest stop field he could imagine, right at the villain's core. Stop. The shimmer flashed. The sludge seized. Bakugo's mouth cleared for a half second. And Izuku screamed, now. The pro-hero moved. No hesitation this time, maybe because Izuku's voice sounded like someone already watching a death. The hero grabbed Bakugo's arm and yanked with everything he had. Bakugo ripped free with a violent cough, stumbling forward, face red and wet with sweat. The sludge villain shrieked, reforming, and then a new gust of wind slammed into the street like judgment. All Might arrived, not gently, not casually, like a hurricane shaped like a man. His voice cracked through the chaos. I am here. The crowd erupted. The villain recoiled. All Might's presence filled the street with a certainty so strong it felt like gravity. Izuku swayed on his feet. He'd done it. He'd opened the moment. He'd bought the second. And now All Might would finish it. Izuku's knees buckled. He hit the ground hard, palms scraping pavement. The world didn't rewind this time. It only wobbled. Echoes danced at the edge of his vision. Bakugo dying, Bakugo living, Bakugo hating him, Bakugo staring like he remembered. Izuku pressed his forehead to the street. Breathing hurt. Existing hurt. He heard All Might's voice distantly, fighting, commanding, winning. Then footsteps approached him. Big ones. All Might crouched, shadow falling over Izuku like a cape. Young man, All Might said. Quieter now, too quiet for the chaos around them. Look at me. Izuku tried. His eyes lifted, unfocused. All Might's smile was there. But it wasn't the poster smile. This smile had concern carved into it. You're bleeding, All Might said. Izuku touched his nose and stared at the red on his fingers like it belonged to someone else. All Might's gaze sharpened again, like he was solving a puzzle. You were too early, he murmured. Izuku's throat tightened. All Might leaned closer, voice dropping so low the crowd noise swallowed it. I saw you step forward before anyone understood what was happening. All Might said. I saw you create an opening. Izuku's heart stuttered. All Might's eyes were intense now, sharp as a spotlight. That wasn't luck. Izuku tried to speak. No words came. All Might held his gaze. Then he said something that made Izuku's blood turn cold in a completely different way. Tell me the truth, Midoriya Izuku. All Might knew his name. Izuku's mouth trembled. All Might's voice was gentle, but underneath it was steel. What is your quirk? Izuku stared up at the symbol of peace with his world splitting behind his eyes. Time hummed in his bones. Echoes pressed against the edges of reality like hands on glass. And Izuku realized something with terrifying clarity. Saving people was easy compared to what came after. Because if All Might found out, if anyone found out, then time wouldn't just be his secret anymore. It would become everyone's weapon. Izuku swallowed hard, blood and fear and truth mixing in his throat. And the chapter end. Ed right there, on the edge of a confession he wasn't sure the world could survive. Scene 1, the symbol steps out of the noise. Sirens painted the street in restless color. The sludge villain was gone. Sealed away by heroes and police like the world wanted to wrap a bandage over what had happened and pretend it wasn't terrifying. People talked loudly, laughing too hard, the way humans do when adrenaline line is still in their veins and they don't know what else to do with it. Bakugo was alive. That should have been enough to make Izuku feel light. Instead, he felt like he was sinking. He sat on the curb, elbows on his knees, staring at the faint red stains on his fingers. The blood on his upper lip had dried in patches, sticky and tight. His brain kept trying to replay the loops, but the loops didn't play cleanly anymore. They overlapped, ghost-thin and jagged, like someone had sliced reality into strips and stacked them wrong. Bakugo's face, choking. Bakugo's face, coughing. Bakugo's face, eyes wide like he knew something. Izuku swallowed hard. A shadow fell across him. All Might crouched again, close enough that Izuku could see the tiny lines near his eyes that posters never showed. Young man, All Might said quietly. And the softness in his voice made Izuku's stomach twist. Can you stand? Izuku tried. His legs wobbled. All Might's hand, huge, warm, hovered near Izuku's shoulder like he wanted to help but wasn't sure if touching would break something. I'm fine, Izuku lied automatically. All Might didn't smile this time. No, he said, gently but firmly. You're not. He looked around. Police were distracted. Heroes were busy. Bakugo was being yelled at by his teacher and refusing to look at anyone's concern as if it was an insult. All Might's gaze returned to Izuku. Walk with me, he said. Izuku's throat tightened. Where? All Might's eyes flicked toward an alley beside him, narrow, quiet, hidden from crowds. Somewhere we can speak, All Might said. Izuku stood on shaking legs and followed. With every step, his body screamed at him that the present was thin glass. And All Might was about to press his hand against it. Scene 2, a question with teeth. The alley smelled like damp concrete and old trash. It was quiet enough that Izuku could hear his own breathing, ragged, uneven. All Might turned so his broad shoulders blocked the view from the street. For one strange second, it felt like All Might was protecting Izuku from the world. Then his voice came, low and serious. Midoriya Izuku, All Might said. Answer me honestly. Izuku's heart jumped at hearing his full name in that voice. All Might held Izuku's gaze like he was pinning him to reality. What did you do back there? Izuku's mouth went dry. I tried to help. That's not what I asked. The words weren't harsh, but they had weight. Izuku's fingers tightened around his notebook strap. His hand was trembling so much the strap kept slipping. All Might continued, slower now, as if he was choosing each word carefully. You moved before the professional heroes moved, All Might said. You shouted, now, at the exact instant the opening appeared. And you created that opening. Izuku swallowed. All Might's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in focus. I have been a hero for a long time, All Might said. I know luck, I know instinct, and I know when something is unnatural. Izuku flinched at the word. All Might's expression softened immediately, like he regretted it. I'm not accusing you, he said quickly. I'm trying to understand, because if I'm right, what you have is dangerous. Dangerous. Izuku's throat tightened around the truth. He remembered his rules. No using it on people. He had broken it. He remembered his fear. If anyone finds out, it becomes a weapon. All Might leaned slightly closer, voice gentler now. You saved a life, he said. That matters. But the way you did it, if it's what I think, then you could also destroy yourself. Izuku stared at All Might's boots, at the scuffed edges. At the proof that even the symbol of peace walked on rough ground. He whispered, I didn't mean for it to happen. All Might's brow furrowed. What happened? Izuku closed his eyes. And for the first time, he did something that felt braver than running into sludge. He spoke. I can rewind, Izuku said, voice shaking. Sometimes. A few seconds. And I can stop things. Like a bubble. All Might went completely still. Izuku rushed the rest out like if he slowed down he'd choke on it. It hurts. It makes my nose bleed. And I remember everything even when I go back. It's like I'm the only one who carries it. Silence. All Might's breathing changed. Just slightly. Like he'd been punched, but internally. Then, very quietly, All Might asked. How many times? Izuku's eyes snapped open. All Might's gaze was sharp and almost painfully kind. How many times did you rewind when Bakugo was captured? All Might repeated. Izuku's lips parted. The number lived in his bones. He didn't know exactly. It had stopped being countable after a while, like trying to count raindrops in a storm. I don't know, Izuku whispered. A lot. All Might exhaled slowly, like he was trying not to let his fear become Izuku's fear. And you're still standing, he murmured. Izuku let out a broken laugh that sounded more like pain. Barely. All Might's eyes dropped to Izuku's nose again, to the dried red. Then his gaze rose and locked onto Izuku's. What is the name of this quirk? He asked. Izuku hesitated, then swallowed. Chronoshift, he said. Saying it out loud made the alley feel colder. All Might nodded once, solemn. Then he said something that made Izuku's stomach drop. You must tell no one else. Izuku blinked. What? All Might's voice hardened, not toward Izuku, but toward the invisible world beyond the alley. There are people, All Might said, who would do anything to own a power like that. Izuku's fingers went numb. All Might's eyes looked darker than the posters. This is not just a quirk. All Might said. It is an invitation. Scene 3, the test you don't know is a test. All Might shifted his stance slightly. It was subtle. Just a repositioning of weight. But Izuku's instinct screamed anyway. Because his body had learned something terrifying in the loops. Small movements lead to big outcomes. All Might reached into his pocket and pulled out a coin. Tea glinted faintly in the alley's dim light. Izuku stared at it, confused. All Might held the coin between thumb and forefinger. I want you to watch closely, All Might said. Izuku nodded, throat tight. All Might flicked the coin upward. It spun, glittering, rising. And Izuku's brain skipped. Not a full rewind. Not a command. Just a sick, sudden feeling like reality tried to stutter and his body refused to pay the price. For a fraction of a second, Izuku saw it. The coin hitting the ground. All Might's hand moving. A sound behind him, a bottle falling, maybe, drawing his attention away for the wrong instant. Then the moment snapped back into a single line again, and the coin was still in the air. Izuku's breath caught. All Might's eyes sharpened. He caught the coin effortlessly and looked at Izuku like a judge watching a trembling witness. What did you see? All Might asked. Izuku's mouth went dry. His voice cracked. I saw it fall. All Might didn't look surprised. He looked certain. You didn't rewind. All Might said softly. But you flinched as if you were about to. Izuku stared at his own hands, shaking. All Might stepped closer, lowering his voice further. That's the most dangerous part, All Might said. Not the power. The habit. Izuku's eyes stung. All Might continued, calm but relentless. When you can redo moments, your mind starts treating the present like a draft, All Might said. You begin to believe mistakes don't matter. Pain doesn't matter. Izuku swallowed, remembering the loops, the deaths that didn't happen, the echoes bleeding into his vision. It still matters, Izuku whispered. It hurts every time. All Might nodded. Yes, he said. And that pain is the only thing keeping you human. The words hit Izuku like a slap. Not cruel. Necessary. All Might's gaze softened again. I am going to say something harsh, All Might warned. Izuku nodded shakily. All Might's voice dropped into steel. You must accept that you cannot save everyone. Izuku's chest tightened. All Might didn't flinch from Izuku's pained expression. If you try, All Might said, Chronoshift will consume you. And then it will consume the world around you. Izuku wanted to argue. Wanted to scream that heroes were supposed to save everyone. But the truth was sitting in his mouth like blood. He had already tasted what it felt like to fight a disaster with nothing but seconds. All Might watched him, then asked, quieter. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Izuku's voice trembled. Yes. All Might nodded once. Then his expression shifted, less like a hero lecturing a kid. More like a man sharing a secret with another secret. Good, All Might said. Because I do not intend to let you face this alone. Izuku's breath caught. All Might held up a hand quickly. I'm not offering you shortcuts. He said. No instant strength. No simple path. Izuku blinked, confused by the specific wording. All Might's eyes flickered, like something heavy lived behind them. But I can teach you discipline. All Might continued. Control. Limits. And most importantly, when not to use it. Izuku's lips parted. It wasn't the dream he'd had 1,000 times. But it was something real. All Might stepped back, posture straighting. All Might said. Izuku swallowed. All Might's gaze turned sharp again. If anyone asks about your quirk, All Might said, you say it is a minor perception type ability. Reflex enhancement. Anything simple. Izuku's heart pounded. But, All Might cut him off gently. You will not lie to protect your pride, he said. You will lie to protect your life. Izuku's stomach turned. All Might's tone softened again. Trust me, young Midoriya, he said. Some truths are magnets for monsters. Scene 4, Temporal Ripples. Bakugo Katsuki didn't speak on the way home. That was the first sign something was wrong. Normally, Bakugo would have been screaming, cursing the heroes, blaming everyone for his humiliation, exploding words as if his anger cool. Burn away the fact that he'd been helpless. Instead, he walked fast, jaw clenched, eyes unfocused. Like his mind was replaying something. At home, he threw his school bag into the corner so hard it bounced. His mother shouted something from the kitchen. He didn't answer. He went straight to the bathroom, locked the door, and gripped the sink. His hands were shaking. Bakugo stared at his own reflection like he didn't trust it. Then it hit him, out of nowhere. A flash of sludge pouring into his mouth. A sensation of choking, drowning. His lungs seizing. His vision going dark. Bakugo jolted and gagged over the sink. Nothing came up. But he retched anyway, harsh and furious, like his body was trying to eject something that wasn't physical. He slammed a fist into the tile. Damn it. His eyes burned. Not with tears. With rage. Because inside his skull, behind his anger, there was a thin, wrong feeling. Like a memory that didn't belong to him. He saw green eyes in the crowd. Not watching like a coward. Watching like someone who already knew what would happen. Bakugo's hands tightened so hard his knuckles whitened. Deku, he whispered, voice low and venomous. His reflection stared back with the same rage. But behind it, barely visible, was something else. Fear. Bakugo hated that fear more than anything. He splashed water on his face and leaned closer to the mirror, eyes narrowing. Did you do something? He growled at his own reflection, as if it could answer. The mirror stayed silent. But time had left its fingerprints on him. And Bakugo could feel them. Scene 5, the mother and the doctor. Inko Midoriya did not accept, I'm fine, as an answer. She saw the dried blood. She saw the way Izuku's hands shook when he lifted a cup. She saw the hollow tightness around his eyes like he'd aged a year overnight. So the next morning, she sat him down. We're going, she said, voice trembling only a little. Izuku wanted to protest. He didn't. He remembered All Might's words, some truths are magnets for monsters. So he told his mother a different truth, one that wasn't a lie, just incomplete. My quirk came in, he said softly. Inko's eyes widened, hope and fear slamming together across her face so fast it looked like pain. A quirk, she whispered. Oh, Izuku. It's complicated, Izuku said quickly. It makes me tired. Inko's hands flew to her mouth. She cried a little, quiet tears, relief tears. The kind that carried years inside them. Izuku sat there feeling like a villain. Not because he had a quirk. Because he had a secret that could get them both killed if the wrong person heard it. At the clinic, The fluorescent lights buzzed too loudly. The doctor asked questions, checked vitals, looked at the nosebleed history, stared at the readings like they weren't sure what they were seeing. Izuku kept his answer small. It feels like heightened reflexes, he said, remembering All Might's instruction. Sometimes I get dizzy. The doctor frowned. Reflex queer. KS don't usually cause neurological stress like this, the doctor murmured, almost to themselves. Izuku's stomach tightened. The doctor left the room to consult. Inko squeezed Izuku's hand, smiling through worry. Izuku smiled back weakly. He didn't see the hallway. He didn't see the nurse whispering to someone on the phone. He didn't see the way the doctor's frown deepened, like something about Izuku's results didn't fit any normal category. But somewhere, in a different place, far from that small clinic, someone who loved collecting rare things would eventually hear one phrase. Temporal irregularities. Izuku didn't know that yet. He only knew his head hurt, his mother looked hopeful, and All Might's warning echoed in his chest like a bell. Some truths are magnets for monsters. And now, the magnet had been switched on. Izuku walked out of the clinic with his mom, winter air biting his cheeks, feeling the present tighten around him like a closing fist. And for the first time, he understood. Chronoshift wasn't just a quirk. It was a countdown. The clinic smelled clean in the way hospitals always did, like disinfectant trying to erase the fact that people suffered inside. Izuku saw tea on the plastic chair while his mom spoke to the receptionist, her voice polite and hopeful. Inko kept glancing back at him like she expected him to vanish if she stopped looking. Izuku kept his hands folded in his lap so no one would notice they were still trembling. A nurse called his name. Midoriya Izuku. He stood. His knees threatened betrayal, but he forced them to cooperate. In the examination room, the doctor returned with a file, their expression careful in that professional way that tried to hide worry behind calm. Your vitals are mostly normal, the doctor said slowly, eyes flicking over a chart. But there are irregularities. Izuku's stomach tightened. Irregularities. Inko echoed, her smile wavering. The doctor tapped the paper, frowning. Stress response markers, neurological strain. Unusual spikes in. They stopped themselves, as if realizing they were about to say too much in front of a parent. Izuku swallowed. Is it dangerous? The doctor looked at him for a long moment. Not necessarily, they said. But their voice didn't carry certainty. However, this doesn't fit a typical reflex-type quirk. Not cleanly. Izuku forced himself to breathe. All Might's words surfaced in his mind like a warning buoy. Some truths are magnets for monsters. The doctor sighed and closed the file. I'm going to refer you, they said, to a specialist. Inko leaned forward instantly. A specialist? For quirks? The doctor nodded. Izuku felt his throat go dry. Just as a precaution, the doctor added quickly. Sometimes late-blooming quirks can present in unexpected ways. Izuku nodded like it was fine. But inside, time tightened around his ribs. Because, unexpected, was how the world described things it didn't understand. And the world didn't understand Chronoshift at all. Scene 2, a call that shouldn't exist. Inko stepped out to make an appointment at the front desk. Izuku stayed behind, seated, staring at the edge of the exam table. The doctor shuffled papers, then paused. Midoriya-kun, they said. Izuku looked up. The doctor hesitated. Have you experienced déjà vu? Hallucinations. The sensation that something has happened before. Izuku's breath hitched. He kept his face neutral with effort that felt like lifting weights. Sometimes, he said carefully. When I'm stressed. The doctor nodded too slowly, eyes narrowing in thought. I see, they murmured. And the nosebleeds. When I push myself, Izuku replied, voice thin. The doctor scribbled a note, then shut the file with a soft thunk. I'm going to step out, they said. Please wait. Izuku nodded. The doctor left. The door closed. For a few seconds, the room stayed silent. Then Izuku heard it, muffled through the wall and hallway, someone speaking in a low voice. Not the receptionist. Not a nurse. The doctor. Yes. The doctor was saying. It's unusual. It doesn't match T. Izuku's fingers tightened. The doctor's voice lowered further. I'd like an opinion. It might be neurological. Or something else. He's a minor. Late manifestation. A pause. Then the doctor said two words that made Izuku's skin go cold. Temporal irregularities. Izuku's heart slammed once, hard. He stood silently, moving like a thief in his own life, and pressed his ear closer to the door. The doctor spoke again, and Izuku caught a name, barely. Dr. Tsubasa. Another pause. Then, yes, I'll forward the results. Izuku backed away from the door. His stomach turned. Dr. Tsubasa. The name meant nothing to him. But the way the doctor said it made it sound like a door opening. A door that shouldn't exist. Scene 3, All Might's first lesson. All Might chose a quiet place to meet him. Not a flashy rooftop this time. A small park tucked between apartment buildings, where the trees made the world feel softer. And the evening air carried the sound of distant traffic like a lullaby. All Might arrived in his large form, smiling like he was trying to keep things normal. But his eyes were always watching. Watching Izuku's posture. Watching his breathing. Watching the tiny tremors in his hands. "You're pale again," All Might said, not accusing, observing. Izuku tried to laugh it off. "I'm adjusting." All Might's smile faded a fraction. "Chronoshift is not something you adjust to by brute force," he said. "It is something you discipline." Izuku nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." All Might raised a hand. "First lesson," he said. "You will stop treating your power like a tool you can pull out whenever you panic." Izuku flinched slightly. All Might continued, voice steady. "Today, you will not rewind. You will not freeze. You will not accelerate." Izuku blinked. "Then what am I supposed to do?" All Might's mouth curved into something almost sad. "You're supposed to learn what you always avoided," All Might said. Izuku swallowed. All Might gestured to the park path. "Run," he said. Izuku stared. All Might's gaze sharpened. "Run until your lungs burn," All Might said. "Run until your legs shake. Run until you learn the difference between exhaustion you can survive, and exhaustion that will break you." Izuku's mouth went dry. All Might added, quieter. "And you will learn to endure failure without rewriting it." Izuku's chest tightened. Because that wasn't training. That was punishment. No, worse. That was reality. Izuku started running. At first it felt normal. Then his body reminded him he'd been cheating time for days. His lungs screamed. His legs trembled. Sweat drenched his shirt. He wanted to stop. He wanted to rewind to the beginning and pace himself perfectly. He wanted to. He clenched his teeth and kept going. All Might watched him from the bench, arms crossed, expression unreadable. When Izuku finally stumbled to a stop, panting, he collapsed onto the grass like he'd been dropped from a height. All Might stood and approached, shadow falling over him. "Good," All Might said. Izuku coughed. "That doesn't feel good." All Might crouched. "No," he agreed. "But it's necessary. Because if you become addicted to second chances." All Might's voice lowered, heavy. "You will become a hero who cannot function without rewriting the world." Izuku stared up at him, shaking, eyes stinging. All Might looked down at him like a man staring at a mirror he didn't want. "And there are villains," All Might murmured, "who would love nothing more than to watch you destroy yourself." SC. Scene 4, The Man Who Collects Unnatural Things. In a place far from parks and sunlight, fluorescent lights hummed over polished floors. A file slid across a desk. A man with glasses read it quietly, his expression calm in the way surgeons looked calm before cutting. His hands were steady. His eyes were not kind. Dr. Kyudai Garaki, known in some circles by other names, paused on a line. Temporal irregularities. He adjusted his glasses. Then, slowly, he smiled. Not wide, not joyful. A small smile of curiosity, as if he'd just heard a rumor about an extinct creature walking again. He lifted the phone. "Yes," he said softly. "Send me the full report. Everything." A voice on the other end spoke nervously. Garaki's smile didn't change. "I understand," he murmured. "No, I don't believe it's a mistake." He tapped the file with one finger. "Late manifestation," he said thoughtfully, almost to himself. "Neurological strain. Echo phenomena." His eyes gleamed behind the lenses. "How rare," he whispered. He hung up. Then he opened another drawer. Inside were folders marked with coded labels, dates, and notes that didn't belong to any normal medical record. Garaki pulled one out and stared at it. A single word on the front. Singularity. He set it beside Izuku's report like they belonged together. Then he leaned back in his chair and spoke into the empty room, voice gentle like a bedtime story. A boy who can bend time, he murmured. He smiled again, still small, still cold. And people thought the world had run out of miracles. Scene 5, AFO's interest. Elsewhere, deeper, darker, where, also. Air, was more concept than location, someone listened. Not with ears, with hunger. A figure sat in shadow, presence vast enough that the room seemed to shrink around it. Doctor. Garaki's voice crackled through a secure line. I believe we have found something unique, Garaki said. Silence answered him. Garaki continued anyway, careful. A late-blooming quirk in a middle school boy, he said. Symptoms. Indicate localized temporal manipulation, short-range rewinds, brief stop fields, high strain, memory retention. The shadow shifted, like interest had weight. Garaki's tone grew reverent. It's unstable, he admitted. But the potential. A voice finally emerged from the darkness, calm as a knife. Name. Garaki smiled, because the request itself was confirmation. Midoriya Izuku, he said. The darkness went still. Then the voice spoke again, softer now. Midoriya, it repeated, tasting the name like it might become useful. A pause. Does he know what he is? Garaki's smile sharpened. Not fully, he said. But he is already using it in moments of crisis. Another pause. Then the voice said something that made Garaki's grin widen, just slightly. Watch him. Garaki bowed his head, even though no one could see it. Of course, he murmured. The line went dead. Garaki set the receiver down and looked at Izuku's file one more time. He spoke to it like a scientist speaking to a specimen. Run, little boy, Garaki whispered. Train. Become strong. His smile returned, thin and patient. Grow into your quirk. He closed the folder. And in that same moment, somewhere in Musudafu, Izuku SN. Eased suddenly, like someone had mentioned him in a room full of ghosts. He rubbed his nose, unaware. Unaware that his secret had been noticed. Unaware that time, now, had predators. Scene 1, the gate that judges. UA. Hi didn't look real. It looked like something a kid would draw in the margins of a notebook. Too tall, too clean, too important to be allowed to exist in the same city as broken sidewalks and cheap convenience stores. Izuku stood at the front gate with hundreds of other applicants, his palms damp, his heart rattling against his ribs. He could feel chronoshift under his skin like a second heartbeat. All Might's voice lived in his head like a rule carved into stone. If anyone asks, it's reflex enhancement. Keep it simple. Keep it safe. Inko squeezed his shoulder before stepping back. Her eyes were shining so hard it hurt to look at her. Do your best, she whispered. No matter what happens, I'm proud of you. Izuku nodded. I will. He didn't say, I'll try not to break time today. He moved with the crowd. The gate opened like a mouth. And Izuku would decide whether he got to be a hero. Or just a boy with an impossible quirk and nowhere to put it. Scene 2, a perfect lie to a perfect school. The written exam was easy. Not because Izuku was a genius, though he was, but because he'd trained for it like a starving person trains for food. Still, he didn't use chronoshift. Not here. Not with teachers watching. Not with cameras. Not with the possibility of someone noticing the stutter of reality. He kept his breathing steady. Kept his pencil strokes calm. He finished early. And that was the first time the temptation hit him like an itch under the skin. I could accelerate. I could review every answer twice. I could. Izuku clenched his jaw until it hurt. No shortcuts. No rewriting. He turned in his paper and walked out with the other students. Outside the practical testing arena, Present Mike's voice boomed through speakers, loud enough to vibrate Izuku's bones. Listen up, you baby heroes. This is where you earn your spots. Robots the size of cars stood behind the gates like metal beasts waiting to be hunted. Izuku swallowed. This wasn't a test of knowledge. This was a test of instinct. And instinct was where chronoshift wanted to take over. Present Mike pointed dramatically. You get points for taking down villain bots. You lose points for attacking other examinees. Got it? A student beside Izuku, tall, polite-looking, glasses, adjusted his frames with a crisp motion and spoke like he was already a teacher. Remember, focus and composure will determine success. Izuku nodded automatically, but his attention was already locked on the battlefield beyond the gates. Concrete. Broken structures. Narrow alleys and open streets. A perfect place for time to turn into a weapon. Present Mike shouted. And, begin. The gates opened. The crowd surged in like a wave. Izuku took one step forward. And forced himself to whisper the lie inside his own head. I'm just fast. Just quick. Just lucky. Scene 3, Microseconds of Mercy. The moment the first robot moved, Izuku's senses sharpened. He didn't accelerate yet. He didn't freeze. He simply watched. A three-pointer rolled into an intersection, turning its head like it was sniffing for targets. Two students attacked from the left, big quirks, flashy impacts. Sparks flew. The robot toppled. Izuku's mind mapped everything. Timing of attacks. Blind spots. Where rubble would fall. Where students would panic. He ran forward, dodging without drama, slipping through gaps that didn't look like gaps unless you'd already watched them happen. A robot's arms swung wide. Izuku ducked under it, heart punching at his ribs. He raised his hand and stopped. Don't. If he froze it, someone might see. If he rewound, someone might notice his too perfect correction. So he did something simple. He grabbed a loose pipe from the ground and jammed it into the robot's knee joint like he'd watched heroes do 1,000 times. Metal shrieked. The joint snapped. The robot collapsed. 1 point. Izuku stared at it like it was proof he could do this without cheating time. Then a two-pointer slammed out from a side street, fast and heavy. And its foot came down where a smaller student stood frozen in fear. Izuku's chest seized. A second ago, he would have hesitated. Now he didn't. He sprinted. The robot's foot dropped. Izuku threw himself forward and shoved the student out of the way. The foot hit the concrete inches from his face. The impact shockwave rattled his teeth. The student scrambled away, screaming thanks. Izuku's hands shook. His heart thundered. And chronoshift purred in his bones. Rewind. You almost died. Rewind. 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 He didn't. He staggered up and ran again. Because All Might was right. If the present became a draft, he'd never learn to live inside it. Scene 4, Acceleration. Borrowing tomorrow. After 5 minutes, Izuku's lungs were on fire. He'd gotten points, but not enough. Students with combat quirks were tearing bots apart like paper. Izuku's body was reaching its limit. And then he saw it, another student cornered, surrounded by two one-pointers. The student's quirk sputtered uselessly. Panic making it fail. Izuku's mind raced. He could reach them, but not in time. His teeth clenched. Faster, he whispered. The world thickened. Not slower, he became faster. His perception sharpened so hard it felt like cutting glass. He could see the robots, movements in frames, like each step had a pause between it. Izuku sprinted and everything around him became a slow-motion storm. He slid under one robot's arm and jammed his pipe into its exposed wiring. It sparked and dropped. He pivoted, too clean, too precise, and kicked the second robot's ankle joint where the metal was weakest. It collapsed. The cornered student stumbled back, stunned. Thank you. Izuku nodded, but his vision was already blurring at the edges. Acceleration ended. The world snapped. Ed back to normal speed with a sickening lurch. Izuku's stomach clenched. His hands trembled violently. He felt heat surge through him like he'd been lit from the inside. Temporal debt. Borrowed time. Borrowed energy. He stumbled behind a broken wall, breathing hard, face slick with sweat. His body screamed for food like it was starving. His head throbbed like it had been hit. He wiped his upper lip. A thin line of blood stained his glove. Izuku swallowed hard. Okay, he rasped. Okay. Short bursts only. He forced himself upright again. Because the exam wasn't over. And he could feel time slipping away. Real time, not rewound time. Scene 5, Zero-Pointer. The ground shook. A deep metallic roar rolled across the arena. Students froze mid-run, heads snapping toward the sound. A shadow loomed over the far buildings, too big. Too massive to be a normal test robot. The zero-pointer emerged like a walking disaster, towering above everything, metal limbs crushing concrete like it was bread. Resent Mike's voice crackled in the distance. Remember, no points for that one. Students scattered like ants. Izuku's heart hammered. He knew what the zero-pointer was meant to do. It was meant to create fear. To make students choose, run, or help someone else. And then Izuku saw her. A brown-haired girl, small, round face, white eyes, stumbling backward. She tried to turn. Her foot caught on rubble. She fell hard. The zero-pointer's shadow swallowed her. Izuku's chest went cold. His body moved before his mind could give permission. He ran. The ground shook again, and the zero-pointer's foot came down like an execution. Izuku felt chronoshift rise up inside him, screaming. Freeze it. Rewind it. Do anything. He didn't have time to be careful. He threw both hands forward, eyes wide, voice cracking with desperation. Stop. A shimmer burst into existence, small, tight, like an invisible bubble slammed into the world. The zero-pointer's foot slowed. Not fully frozen, but enough. Enough for a heartbeat. Izuku grabbed the girl's wrist and yanked. Pain exploded through his shoulder. His feet slipped. The stop field collapsed. The robot's foot slammed down. Concrete erupted. The shockwave threw Izuku and the girl sideways like dolls. Izuku hit the ground hard, rolling, breath punched from his lungs. His vision flashed white. Echoes exploded across his sight, multiple versions of the moment layered wrong. The girl crushed. The girl saved. Izuku crushed. Izuku standing. His head screamed. He tasted blood again. He forced his eyes open. The girl was alive, coughing, staring at him like he'd just pulled her out of a nightmare. I couldn't move, she whispered, voice shaking. Thank you. Izuku tried to speak. His throat didn't work. He pushed her toward safety with trembling hands. Go, he rasped. Run. She ran. Izuku forced himself up, and saw something that made his stomach drop. A different student, a boy with a decent quirk, one who had been racking up point tower. Rode a cluster of robots on the other side. When Izuku created the stop field and the shockwave hit, rubble had shifted. A slab of concrete slid into that boy's path. The boy tripped, hard. His bot target moved away. He scrambled up, frantic. Losing precious seconds. Izuku stared, frozen, not with his quirk, but with guilt. He'd saved one person, and the world had taken something from someone else. A small thing. A few seconds. But in an exam like this, seconds were everything. Izuku's breath came out shaky. Temporal ripple. Not magic. Not prophecy. Just consequence. Time didn't let him do good for free. Scene 6, the scoreboard stutters. After the exam, students gathered, exhausted, bruised, buzzing with adrenaline and dreams. Izuku sat alone on a bench, gripping his notebook like it was the only solid thing left in a world that kept trying to flicker. His entire body felt wrong, heavy and light at the same time. He could still see faint echo afterimages when he blinked too hard. A teacher walked past, tall, tired-looking. Hair messy, eyes sharp even when half-lidded. Aizawa Shota. He didn't stop, but his gaze slid over Izuku for a fraction of a second too long. And Izuku felt it, like being weighed. Like being measured. Then the large digital scoreboard at the far end of the arena flickered. Just once. Numbers displayed. Changed. Displayed again. For a heartbeat, Izuku saw something impossible. His own name, with a score that couldn't be right. Then it corrected. As if reality had caught itself making a mistake. Izuku's blood ran cold. No one else reacted. Or if they did, they dismissed it as a screen glitch. Izuku sat there, breathing slowly, hands shaking. Because he knew what that flicker felt like. It wasn't electronics. It was the same stutter he felt when chronoshift pulled. A ripple reaching somewhere it wasn't supposed to reach. He pressed his fingers to his temple, trying to steady the pounding behind his eyes. And in the back of his mind, a quiet fear formed into a sentence so sharp it hurt. What if UA can detect me? The thought was immediately followed by another, worse one. What if someone else already has? Izuku looked up at the sky above UA, bright and innocent. And for the first time since he named his quirk, he realized. Chronoshift wasn't just changing fights. It was changing systems, records, results, fate, and if the world had rules. Then, breaking them would eventually draw something's attention. Something that didn't care if he meant well. Scene 1, uniform, heartbeat, countdown. The UA uniform felt heavier than cloth. It felt like a verdict. Izuku stood in front of his mirror, adjusting the tie for the third time, staring at his own eyes like he was trying to confirm he was still the same person who'd once begged the universe for any quirk at all. Chronoshift didn't feel like a gift. It felt like a loaded question. On his desk, his notebook was open to a page of rules. No rewinds at school. No freezing unless life or death. Acceleration only in micro bursts, only if no one can tell. If echoes appear, stop. His fingers hovered over the last rule. Because he'd already broken it during the exam. Because the scoreboard had stuttered. Because something about UA itself had felt aware. He swallowed. Just be normal, he whispered to himself. Then immediately hated the words. Normal had never saved him. Maybe, just maybe, normal could hide him. He closed the notebook carefully, like closing a secret coffin, and stepped out of his room. Scene 2, Class 1A, a room full of fireworks. UA's halls were too clean. Too wide, like they were built for confidence. Izuku walked fast, head down, until he found the classroom door marked 1A. His heartbeat thumped once, hard. He slid the door open and stepped into chaos. A boy with spiky hair was half standing on a desk shouting at a calm-looking student with glasses. A girl with pink skin waved cheerfully. Someone laughed too loudly. Someone else asked if anyone wanted to be friends. It was loud, bright, alive. For a second, Izuku forgot to be afraid. Then, oi! Bakugo's voice cut through the room like a blade. Izuku turned slowly. Bakugo sat with his legs spread, elbows on his knees. Eyes locked onto Izuku like he'd been waiting just to confirm something. His stare wasn't normal anger. It was searching. Like Bakugo was trying to find the shape of a memory he couldn't fully hold. You, Bakugo said, voice low. Izuku forced a small smile. Hi, Kachan. Bakugo stood. The room quieted, not because people were respectful, but because Bakugo had the kind of presence that made silence happen. You followed me here, Bakugo snarled. Izuku flinched. No, I got in on my own. Bakugo's jaw clenched. For half a second, Izuku saw something flicker in Bakugo's eyes, an image. A shard, like deja vu twisting into rage. Bakugo took one step closer. I remember choking, Bakugo said, voice dangerous and quiet. I remember dying. Izuku's blood went cold. The room went still. Someone whispered, dying. Izuku's mouth went dry. He glanced around. No one else understood what Bakugo meant. But Izuku did, and that meant the ripple had reached farther than he'd feared. Bakugo leaned in, close enough that Izuku could smell the faint smoke-sweet scent of his quirk even when he wasn't using it. You did something, Bakugo hissed. I don't know what, but you did. Izuku's hands trembled. He forced himself to meet Bakugo's gaze. I didn't, he lied. Bakugo's eyes narrowed like he could taste a lie. Then, before Bakugo could say more, a sleeping bag dropped from the ceiling. It hit the floor with a soft thud. A man stepped out of it like he had been stored away. Messy hair, dead eyes, a voice that sounded like he'd already decided everyone was disappointing. Sit down, Aizawa Shota said. The room obeyed instantly. Bakugo sat, but his stare never left Izuku. Izuku sat too, trying not to look like prey. Aizawa's gaze moved across the room like a slow blade. Then it stopped on Izuku for a fraction longer than the others. Not accusation, recognition, like he'd noticed the stutter at the exam and filed it away. Izuku's stomach tightened. Scene 3, Quirk Apprehension Test, The Present Hurts. Aizawa led them outside. No dramatic speech, no welcome, no warmth, just a brutal statement. You think you got into UA. Prove you deserve to stay. He explained the Quirk Apprehension Test like it was routine. Izuku's mind raced. Tests meant limits. Limits meant pressure. Pressure meant Chronoshift whispering fix it fix it fix it. Aizawa's eyes scanned them. You will use your quirks, he said. If you hold back, you fail. Izuku swallowed. If I use mine, I get noticed. If I don't, I fail. He felt the trap close. Aizawa tossed a softball in the air casually. First, ball throw, he said. Students lined up. The first few were flashy, big blasts, big numbers, cheers. Izuku watched each throw, calculating angles and trajectories automatically. Then his turn came. He stepped up, holding the ball. His fingers felt too weak. Not physically weak, visible weak. Aizawa's gaze locked onto him. What's your quirk? Aizawa asked, tone flat. Izuku remembered All Might's instruction. He forced the lie into his mouth, tasting how cheap it sounded compared to the truth. Reflex enhancement, Izuku said. Perception acceleration. Aizawa blinked once. It wasn't disbelief. It was the kind of blink people did when they were storing information. Throw, Aizawa said. Izuku wound up. He could throw like a normal kid. The number would be humiliating. But if he accelerated, just a micro burst, he could optimize the throw without anyone seeing the stutter. Just enough to look trained instead of impossible. He inhaled. Faster, he whispered inside his teeth. Time thickened. Not fully. Not obvious. Just enough that the wind felt slower against his wrist angle by a fraction. Stepped exactly where his body wanted to step. Through. The ball flew farther than his body should have allowed. Not a miracle. But not normal. The number appeared. It wasn't the top. But it wasn't humiliating either. Izuku's stomach churned as acceleration ended, heat blooming in his chest. He swallowed hard, keeping his face steady. Aizawa stared at the number, then at Izuku. Reflex, Aizawa repeated quietly, like testing the word's weight. Izuku nodded, forcing calm. Behind him, Bakugo scoffed. But the scoff sounded uncertain. Like Bakugo had expected something else. Like Bakugo had seen Izuku throw that ball twice in his head already. Scene 4, Echoes in the sprint. The 50-meter dash came next. Students lined up. Izuku's legs still felt weak from the micro-burst, as if acceleration had eaten a piece of him. Aizawa's voice was flat. Go. Izuku ran. Not special. Not flashy. Just fast for him. But halfway through, he felt it. A hitch in the air. A tiny, sick skip. Like the world swallowed a frame. His foot hit the ground and for a fraction of a second, he saw it. Him tripping. Him falling. Him losing the dash. An echo of a version that almost happened. His stomach flipped. He adjusted instinctively. Just a hair. Just a tiny correction. He didn't rewind. He didn't freeze. He just shifted his weight. And he didn't fall. He crossed the finish line breathing hard, heart hammering. He tried to convince himself it was nothing. Then he heard a yelp. A student in the next lane, one Izuku hadn't even been watching, stumbled awkwardly and hit the ground, scraping their elbow. Not badly, but enough to sting, enough to lose time, enough to be noticed. Izuku stared, chest tightening. It felt like the same thing he'd seen at the entrance exam. His correction had changed the rhythm. The rhythm had changed someone else's step. Temporal ripple. A small consequence. But it was there. Aizawa walked over to the fallen student, expression bored, then looked up and scanned the lanes. His eyes landed on Izuku again. Not blame. Not anger. Just quiet attention. The kind that made Izuku feel like a bug pinned to a board. Scene 5, Aizawa's notebook. By the time the test ended, Izuku felt hollowed out. No major chronoshift usage. No obvious stutters. But his head ached. And faint echo afterimages kept slipping into his peripheral vision like ghosts testing the door. Class 1A gathered as Aizawa spoke. Final results will be posted, Aizawa said. Worst performer faces expulsion. The word expulsion landed like a punch. Izuku's stomach turned. He'd come here to become a hero. Not to be thrown out before he even started. As students whispered and panicked, Aizawa turned away and walked toward the equipment shed. He pulled out a small notebook, different from Izuku's messy scribbles. A thin, neat notebook. He wrote a single line. Midoriya Izuku, quirk claim, reflex perception. Observed. Micro corrections too precise. Possible anomaly. He paused, pen hovering. Then added. Exam day, scoreboard flicker. Today, lane ripple, monitor. Aizawa closed the notebook and slipped it into his pocket. His face remained exhausted and flat. But his eyes were sharp. And they were pointed directly at the one student in the class who kept reviving moments that felt like they should have gone differently. Scene 6, after class, stay. The bell rang. Students began to leave in clusters, voices loud again, stress dissolving into chatter. Izuku gathered his things carefully. Moving like he was afraid sudden motion would trigger an echo. He stood to leave. Aizawa's voice cut through the noise, quiet but absolute. Midoriya. Izuku froze. Aizawa looked at him without blinking. Stay after, Aizawa said. The room seemed to shrink. Bakugo glanced back, eyes narrowed, like he'd been waiting for this too. Izuku's mouth went dry. Yes, sir. Students filed out. The door slid shut. Now it was just the two of them. Aizawa leaned back against his desk, arms crossed, eyes tired and sharp at the same time. Reflex enhancement, Aizawa said, tone flat. That's what you told me. Quote. Izuku nodded, throat tight. Aizawa's gaze didn't move. Explain, Aizawa said. Not a request. A test. Izuku felt chronoshift stir under his skin like a beast hearing its name. And he realized, too late, that UA wasn't just a school. It was a place built to find what people were hiding. And Aizawa Shota had just put his hand on the edge of Izuku's secret. Scene 1, Eyes That Don't Look Away. The classroom felt different when it was empty. Without the noise of students, the fluorescent lights seemed louder. The air felt thinner. Even Izuku's breathing NDED suspicious, like the room was listening for it. Aizawa leaned against the desk, arms crossed, expression exhausted. But his eyes didn't droop. They pinned. Explain, Aizawa repeated. Izuku swallowed so hard his throat hurt. My quirk enhances perception and reflexes, he said, keeping his voice steady with effort. It helps me react. Aizawa stared at him, unblinking. You threw the ball Ith the kind of precision you'd see in someone who's trained for years, Aizawa said. But you don't have the body conditioning for it. Izuku's fingers curled around his bag strap. I train, he said weakly. Aizawa's eyes narrowed slightly. You also made a correction mid-sprint that shifted another student's stride, Aizawa said. That wasn't just you being fast. That was you being ahead. Izuku's chest tightened. Aizawa's voice stayed flat, but every word landed like a weight. Tell me what your quirk really does, Aizawa said. Izuku's mind screamed. Number. All Might had told him not to share. And Aizawa wasn't anyone, he was a teacher, a pro-hero, someone who could help. But secrets didn't care about intentions. Secrets only cared about who heard them. Izuku forced calm. It's complicated, he said. Aizawa's gaze sharpened. All quirks are complicated, Aizawa replied. But you're treating yours like it has consequences you don't want me to see. Izuku's pulse spiked. Aizawa shifted his weight. You have two choices, he said. Either you're hiding something dangerous, or you're lying because you're insecure. Izuku flinched. Aizawa's voice didn't soften. If it's insecurity, I can fix that with training. If it's danger, his eyes narrowed. I need to know. Izuku's lips parted. His brain tried to find a safe middle path. A truth that wasn't the whole truth. He swallowed, then spoke carefully. My quirk can create a short pause effect, Izuku said, voice trembling. Like slowing things for a second. But it hurts me when I overuse it. Aizawa watched him for a long moment. Then he said, how long? Quote. Izuku's mind raced. If I say seconds, he asks why I was so precise. If I say milliseconds, it sounds harmless. If I lie too much, he'll know. A second, Izuku admitted. Aizawa's expression didn't change, but his eyes hardened. That's not reflex enhancement, Aizawa said. Izuku's stomach dropped. Aizawa pushed off the desk and walked toward Izuku slowly, footsteps quiet on the floor. I don't care what you call it, Aizawa said. I care what it does to you. He stopped at arm's length. You're bleeding. You're shaking. You look like you've been sleep deprived for days. His voice lowered. That kind of strain doesn't come from being quick. Izuku clenched his jaw. Aizawa stared at him, then spoke the sentence Izuku didn't want to hear. Our quirk is a liability unless it's controlled. Izuku's heart sank. Aizawa's eyes stayed locked on his. Starting today, Aizawa said, you keep a log. Izuku blinked. A log. Every time you use your quirk, Aizawa said. What you did. How long. What it cost you. And what changed. Izuku's skin prickled. He echoed weakly. Aizawa's gaze was sharp. Don't play dumb, he said. If your quirk affects timing in any way, it affects outcomes. That means it affects people. Izuku's throat tightened. Aizawa leaned closer slightly. If I catch you using it recklessly, he said quietly, I will remove you from the field. Do you understand? Izuku whispered, yes, sir. Aizawa's voice softened a fraction, not kind, but real. I'm not trying to ruin you, Aizawa said. I'm trying to keep you alive. Izuku nodded, eyes stinging. Aizawa straightened. Go home, he said. Sleep. Eat properly. And bring me the first entry in your log tomorrow. Izuku's legs felt weak as he bowed and left. He didn't know T.C. Aizawa's hand slipped briefly to the capture weapon at his waist, as if, for a heartbeat, he'd considered what he'd do if Izuku's quirk went out of control right here in the room. Scene 2, Bakugo's fragment. Izuku didn't walk with anyone after school. He never had. Now it felt like survival. He kept to side streets, head down, trying to avoid attention. But time didn't let him stay invisible. As he turned a corner, he heard footsteps behind him, fast, aggressive. Izuku's stomach dropped. Deku. Bakugo's voice was a snarl. Izuku froze. He didn't turn immediately. He didn't want to see Bakugo's face. Didn't want to see whether the ripple memories had grown sharper. Bakugo shoved him from behind anyway. Izuku stumbled, caught himself. Bakugo grabbed the collar of Izuku's uniform and yanked him around. Bakugo's eyes were wild, not just angry, fractured. I saw it again, Bakugo hissed. Izuku's throat tightened. Saw what? Bakugo's grip tightened. Me dying. Izuku's blood went cold. Bakugo's face twisted like he hated himself for saying it out loud. It's like my brain skips. Bakugo snapped. Like I'm there and then I'm not and then I am again. Izuku's hands trembled. Bakugo leaned closer, voice low and vicious. You were looking at me like you knew, Bakugo said. Back there. During the sludge thing. Like you'd already watched it happen. Izuku's mouth went dry. Bakugo's eyes narrowed. You did something, he said again, quieter. What did you do? Izuku's mind screamed. If Bakugo kept pushing, Izuku might break. If Bakugo yelled, someone might hear. If Izuku panicked, Chronoshift would respond. Bakugo shook him once, hard. Answer me. Izuku's vision flickered at the edges. Echoes flashed. Bakugo choking, Bakugo screaming, Bakugo's hand tightening, Bakugo's fist landing. Izuku's head throbbed. He forced words out through clenched teeth. I didn't do anything to you, Izuku said. I just helped. Bakugo's eyes flared. Helped. He spat. You helped. Don't make me laugh. Izuku flinched, but his voice went small and sharp with desperation. I'm not lying. Bakugo stared at him, and for half a second, Izuku saw something terrifying. Bakugo's anger wavered, not into softness, into fear. Fear that his own mind was breaking. Bakugo released Izuku suddenly, shoving him away like he hated touching him. TCH, Bakugo hissed. Whatever. He turned to leave, shoulders tense. Then he paused. Without looking back. If I find out you messed with me, Bakugo said, voice low, I'll kill you. He walked off. Izuku stood shaking, breathing hard. His hands clenched. Chronoshift stirred in his ribs like it wanted to solve the problem in the easiest way. Rewind the conversation. Say the perfect words. Make Bakugo calm. Make him forget. Izuku swallowed hard. No, he whispered to himself. No rewinds. Because if he rewound this, he'd start rewinding everything. And then he really would become what Bakugo was accusing him of. Scene 3, the logbook. That night, Izuku sat at his desk and opened a new notebook. Not his hero analysis notebook. A new one. Clean pages. A place for truth. He wrote the title carefully. CHRONOSHIFT log, required. His hand hovered. He could lie. He could give Aizawa something harmless. But Aizawa's eyes had been too sharp. And All Might's warning echoed in his bones. Discipline. So Izuku wrote the truth, just enough of it. Entry 001, UA. Entrance exam. Used stop field once approximately. Less than 1 second to delay 0-pointer footfall. Physical cost. Nosebleed, nausea, migraine, echo afterimages. Consequence observed. Rubble shifted elsewhere. Another examinee lost time, opportunity. Ripple effect. Izuku's pen trembled. He wrote another. Entry 002, quirk apprehension test. Used micro-acceleration burst percep. Tion plus movement timing during ball throw. Physical cost. Overheating, hand tremor, mild nosebleed. Consequence observed. Sprint lane anomaly after my correction, another student tripped possible ripple. Izuku stared at the page. Seeing it written made it worse. It made it real. It made it look like evidence. He swallowed and wrote. Entry 003, side effects. Echo flashes increasing with stress. Deja vu fragments observed in Bakugo Katsuki, possible memory bleed. His pen froze. He stared at the last line. Because if Bakugo's memory was bleeding through time, then eventually, someone else's might too. And if AFO ever got his hands on someone who could remember across rewinds. Izuku's stomach twisted. He shut the notebook hard and pressed his palms to his face. Time manipulation wasn't a power. It was an infection. Scene 4, Aizawa's warning becomes real. The next day, Izuku handed the logbook to Aizawa with trembling hands. Aizawa read it in silence, eyes moving steadily. The longer he read, the more Izuku's stomach sank. When Aizawa finished, he didn't hand it back immediately. He looked at Izuku. You used it during the exam, Aizawa said flatly. Izuku nodded, throat tight. You noticed a ripple. Aizawa continued. And you still used it again. Izuku flinched. Someone was going to get crushed. I'm not blaming you for saving someone, Aizawa cut in. I'm telling you this, your quirk doesn't just have a cost. It has collateral. Izuku swallowed. Aizawa's gaze sharpened. And you wrote this. He tapped the line about Bakugo. Deja vu fragments. Izuku's skin prickled. Aizawa's voice lowered. If your quirk can cause memory bleed, Aizawa said, then it can cause psychological damage. Izuku's mouth went dry. Aizawa handed the logbook back, but his fingers stayed on it for half a heartbeat longer than necessary, like he didn't want to let go of the only proof he had. Listen carefully, Midoriya, Aizawa said, voice firm. You are not allowed to your quirk around other students unless I give you permission. Izuku's heart dropped. But, what if? Aizawa's eyes turned sharp enough to cut. If it's life or death, you do what you must, he said. But if you're using it to optimize, he leaned forward slightly. You're not training. You're gambling with reality. Izuku's breathing hitched. Aizawa's tone softened slightly, but only because he meant it. This is UA, Aizawa said. You can become a hero here. But only if you learn to be human in the present. Izuku nodded shakily. Aizawa's eyes narrowed again. And Midoriya, he added quietly, if you ever try to rewind me. Izuku froze. Aizawa's gaze held him like a trap. I will know, Aizawa finished. Izuku's blood went cold. Aizawa stepped back. Go to class, he said, as if he hadn't just dropped a knife into Izuku's chest. Izuku turned and walked out. His hands were shaking so hard he had to shove them into his pockets. Because Aizawa wasn't just suspicious. He was prepared. Scene 5, a ripple bigger than seconds. Later that day, during a simple training drill, it happened. Nothing dramatic. No villains. No explosions. Just students practicing movement. Izuku was careful. He didn't use Kronvin think about it. But his vision flickered anyway. An echo flashed. A student turning too late, colliding hard, breaking an arm. Izuku's body reacted without permission. He grabbed the student's sleeve and yanked them back a step. The collision didn't happen. Instead, another student, behind them, stumbled. Their ankle twisted. They yelped, falling. Not broken, but injured. The room went silent for a second. Izuku stood frozen. He hadn't rewound. He hadn't frozen. He hadn't accelerated. He'd just acted. But time still rippled. Because he had changed a moment that was supposed to happen. Aizawa's gaze snapped to him instantly. Not angry. Not surprised. Just grim. Like he'd been waiting for the proof. Izuku's throat tightened. Because now he understood something terrifying. Even when he didn't actively use Chronoshift. Chronoshift was changing how he moved. How he reacted. How he interfered. And interference, even normal interference, was enough to reshape outcomes. A hero who knows too much doesn't just save people, he rewrites them. Scene 1, Rescue Training, Real Fear. The USJ looked like a movie set built to trick the body into panicking. A flood zone. A collapsed city block. A mountain trail with broken guardrails. An artificial sky so wide it made you forget you were inside a dome. Izuku stood with Class 1A at the entrance platform, trying to breathe like a normal student. Trying to be a normal student. Aizawa stood in front of them with his usual dead-eyed posture, scarf trailing like a sleeping serpent. This is the unforeseen simulation joint, 13 said brightly. Helmet shining. Today's lesson is rescue. Saving lives is the foundation of heroism. Izuku nodded, notebook not in his hand for once. He'd left it in his bag on purpose. No analysis crutch. No rewinds. No drafts. Just the present. Then Aizawa's phone buzzed. His expression shifted, just slightly. Not surprise. Recognition. Like something he'd been waiting for finally arrived. Aizawa's head lifted, eyes narrowing toward the central plaza. Everyone, Aizawa said, voice sharpening. Stay behind me. The students stiffened. 13 tilted their helmet. Aizawa. Is something. The air warped. A purple-black fog blossomed at the plaza's center like a bruise forming on reality. Izuku's stomach dropped. Because he'd seen that kind of wrongness before. Not fog. A stutter. Kurogiri stepped out of the distortion, body made of mist and intent. Behind him came more shapes, villains, dozens of them. And at the center, walking calmly as if he owned the world. A pale figure with messy hair and a hand on his face. Shigaraki Tamura. Izuku's blood turned to ice. This wasn't training. This wasn't a lesson. This was a real event forcing itself into their timeline. Chronoshift. Tea stirred under Izuku's skin like it had been waiting for the USJ to become true. Scene 2, Aizawa moves like a knife. Aizawa didn't hesitate. He stepped forward like the world owed him an opening. 13 began to speak, warning. Evacuation, but Aizawa was already pulling his capture weapon loose, scarf uncoiling like a living thing. 13, Aizawa said without looking back. Protect the students. Then he turned his gaze onto the crowd of villains, eyes sharpening, hair lifting. His erasure activated. Villains flinched as their quirks failed. A few stumbled, confused. Aizawa launched. He hit the first villain like a silent explosion, elbow, sweep, throw, efficient, brutal, clean. Izuku watched, stunned. This was what heroes looked like when there was no stage. No speeches. Just action. But then the air behind Aizawa rippled. Kurogiri's fog curled like a hand reaching. And Izuku felt it again, that hook in his chest. That tug that meant the present was about to become a catastrophe. Aizawa's scarf snapped out, but the warp gate opened under his feet. Aizawa vanished. 13 shouted. Students screamed. Izuku's breath hitched. And Chronoshift whispered in him, sweet as poison. Go back. Scene 3, warped into the wrong places. Izuku tried to move, tried to run toward the plaza. And the fog swallowed him. Kurogiri's warp wasn't teleportation. It was like being poured through a straw. Cold, compressed, wrong. Izuku's stomach flipped. His ears popped. Then, he fell. Hard. Into water. Salt stung his mouth. Waves slapped his face. He coughed, spluttering, grabbing at air. He surfaced and saw it, the flood zone. Boat wrecks. Broken docks. Artificial waves. And villains. 3 of them stood on a half-submerged platform, grinning like they'd just been handed a gift. Izuku spun, frantic, counting heads. Sue. Mineta. They were here too, coughing, scrambling onto a floating piece of debris. Sue's eyes were wide. Ribbit, Midoriya, are you okay? Izuku nodded, chest tight. Mineta screamed, why are there real villains? I didn't sign up for this. The villains stepped forward. One cracked his knuckles. Another lifted a knife-like tool. Izuku's brain tried to map the situation. And the echo hit. A flash, sharp as lightning. Sue being grabbed under the water. Mineta screaming once and going silent. Izuku reaching. Too late. His vision snapped back to the present, heart hammering. He hadn't rewound. But his mind had seen something. A future. An echo. A branch tugging at him. He swallowed hard. Aizawa's rule rang in his head. Only if life or death. Izuku looked at the villains again. The way they advanced. The way the waves rocked the debris. Life or death didn't always announce itself with a countdown. Sometimes it just happened. Izuku clenched his fists. Stay close to me, he whispered to Sue and Mineta. Mineta grabbed onto Sue like a lifeline. Sue nodded, jaw tight. The villains lunged. Scene 4, the first rewind at USJ. A wave crashed. Debris shifted. One villain leapt. Sue's foot slipped. She fell sideways, arm flinging out. And the same moment from the echo tried to become real. A hand grabbed Sue's ankle and yanked. Sue's eyes widened. Mineta shrieked. Izuku moved. Too slow. Sue's head hit the water, swallowed by waves and villain hands. Izuku's heart stopped. Sue. He reached, but the water pulled her away like the world had decided. And Izuku's mind snapped. Go back. The world hooked him by the ribs and yanked. Cold. Compression. A brutal snap. Izuku gasped. And Sue was upright again. Her foot hadn't slipped yet. The wave hadn't hit that angle. The villain's leap hadn't landed. But Izuku's lungs burned like he'd been drowned. Blood trickled from his nose instantly. He didn't even wipe it. He grabbed Sue's wrist hard. Don't move, Izuku hissed. Sue blinked. Midoriya. The wave hit. Debris shifted. The villain leapt. And this time, Sue didn't slip. Izuku shoved her backward and flung his hands out. Stop. A tight shimmer snapped into place at the villain's knee mid-leap. The villain's motion stuttered, just enough. Sue kicked, long frog leg strike, slamming the villain sideways into the water. Mineta sobbed. What was that? Izuku staggered, vision flickering. Echoes burst at the edges of his sight. Sue drowning, Sue breathing, Mineta screaming, Mineta laughing, stacked wrong, like a deck of cards half spilled. Sue stared at Izuku. Her eyes narrowed slowly. I saw that, she whispered. Izuku's blood turned colder than the water. Saw what? He tried. Sue's throat bobbed. Me, she swallowed. Me falling. Mineta whipped his head around, panicked. I saw it too. I saw it for a second, like a dream. Izuku's hands shook. He hadn't just rewound. He'd rewound with them close enough that the present had smeared onto their minds. Memory bleed. A ripple strong enough to touch other people. Izuku swallowed hard. He'd just broken the most important hidden rule. Chronoshift wasn't private anymore. Scene 5, The Paradox. Saving one makes two pay. More villains climbed onto the wreckage. Izuku's head throbbed not to use the quirk again. But the water zone wasn't forgiving. A villain swung a metal pipe at Mineta. Izuku flinched, trying to move. His vision flashed an echo. Mineta's skull cracking, a scream cut short. Izuku's stomach lurched. He whispered without thinking, go back. A tiny rewind, only a few seconds, snapped him backward. Mineta wasn't hit. Izuku shoved him down. The pipe swung over Mineta's head instead. Mineta lived. But the pipe didn't disappear. It completed its arc and slammed into something else. A dull crack. Sue hissed in pain as the metal clipped her forearm. Not shattered. Not fatal. But injured. Her breath hitched, eyes narrowing, pain flashing across her face. Izuku stared, horrified. He'd saved Mineta, and the universe had charged him immediately. Not with cosmic lightning, with physics, with consequence. Aizawa's voice echoed in his mind like a verdict. Collateral. Izuku's hands trembled. Sue flexed her arm, jaw clenched. I'm okay, she said quickly, but her eyes were on Izuku now, sharp, suspicious, scared. Midoriya, she whispered, low so the villains wouldn't hear. Did you do something? Izuku swallowed hard. He couldn't lie to her face. Not when she'd seen the fall that never happened. His voice broke. I can't explain now. Sue's eyes widened. Mineta clutched Izuku's sleeve, crying. Are we stuck in a time loop? Izuku wanted to scream. Instead he forced his breathing to slow. Listen, Izuku said, voice tight. We get out. We find the others. We survive. Sue nodded slowly, eyes hard. Ribbit. Izuku felt the present tighten like a noose. Because the paradox wasn't theoretical anymore. It was real and bleeding and happening in front of him. Every time he fixed one death, another injury moved to replace it. Scene 6, Aizawa's collapse, Aizawa's eyes. The flood zone wasn't the only battlefield. Across the USJ Dome, chaos spread. Explosions, screams, quirks flaring. Izuku could see flashes in the distance, sparks and smoke above the city zone. He scanned for escape routes. Then the water around them warped. Kurogiri's mist tore open again, forming a gate like a wound. Izuku's blood ran cold. Because the warp wasn't random. It was selective. Kurogiri spoke calmly, voice like a polite funeral. Midoriya Izuku, it said. Izuku froze. Sue's eyes widened. He knows your name. Mineta squeaked like a dying animal. Izuku's heart slammed. Kurogiri's fog curled toward him like reaching fingers. Come, Kurogiri said, tone gentle. Our master wishes to speak with you. Izuku's mouth went dry. Shigaraki. The one with the hand on his face. The one who looked like rot given a human shape. Izuku clenched his fists. He could rewind. He could try to escape. But Kurogiri was a warp. Rewinding a step might not change where a portal opened next. It might even make it worse. Izuku's vision flickered, echoes of gates opening in different angles. His head screamed. Then, like a lifeline thrown into a storm, Aizawa appeared. He didn't warp in gracefully. He stumbled out of a gate at the edge of the flood zone, scarf half torn, breathing ragged. Blow. Od ran down his face from a cut near his eye. His gaze snapped up, and locked on Izuku. Aizawa's eyes narrowed instantly, recognizing the warp gate's shape, the villains, the positioning. Then his gaze sharpened on Izuku's face. On the blood at his nose. On the tight panic in his posture. Like he could see the rewind residue clinging to him. Aizawa's voice was harsh. Midoriya. Izuku's chest tightened. Aizawa moved, fast, even injured, swinging his capture scarf like a whip. It wrapped around Kurogiri's misty core, yanking it off balance. Kurogiri's gate wavered. The pull on Izuku's body loosened for a fraction of a second. Izuku felt Chronoshift rise up, desperate. This was the moment. This was the opening. If he froze Kurogiri, just 1 second, Aizawa could close the gate. They could run. Izuku threw his hands forward. Stop. A tight shimmer snapped into place around the swirling mist. The gate stuttered. And inside the frozen fog, something moved. Not much. Just a twitch. A tiny adjustment. Like the mist resisted being still. Izuku's eyes widened in horror. Kurogiri's voice came through the freeze, distorted but calm. Interesting. The freeze shattered. Izuku staggered, migraine detonating behind his eyes. Aizawa's scarf slipped. Kurogiri stabilized, gate reforming. And Aizawa. Aizawa swayed. His knees threatened to buckle. Izuku saw it, an echo, brutal and clear. Aizawa falling. Aizawa's head hitting the deck. Aizawa's erasure blinking out. The villains swarming the students like wolves. Izuku's chest seized. He couldn't let that happen. His mind screamed the word before he could stop it. Go back. The world snapped. And the moment rewound. Just enough. Just a few seconds. Just. Izuku gasped, blood pouring now. Aizawa was still upright. Kurogiri's gate was still forming. Izuku's lungs burned as if he'd been underwater again. And this time, Aizawa's eyes, already sharp, went sharper. He looked straight at Izuku. Not confused. Not surprised. Like he'd felt the shift. Like he'd caught the edge of the rewind brushing past him. Aizawa's jaw tightened. But he didn't stop to confront. He used the second Izuku had stolen. He lunged, scarf snapping, erasure blazing. Run. Aizawa barked. Izuku grabbed Sue and Mineta and pulled them back, moving on raw instinct. Kurogiri's gate snapped shut behind them like teeth. They escaped the flood zone by inches. Zuku's knees almost buckled from the strain. Sue stared at Izuku, breath shaking. Mineta sobbed, clinging to Izuku like he'd found religion. Aizawa didn't look back, but Izuku knew. He knew Aizawa had felt it. And if Aizawa had felt it, then Kurogiri had, too. And if Kurogiri could resist being frozen, then Chronoshift wasn't the biggest predator in the room anymore. It was prey being sniffed. SC. Ein 7, Nomu, the anchor that won't move. They regrouped in the central plaza with other students, battered, terrified, alive. Iida shouted for order, voice shaking. Uraraka looked pale, eyes unfocused. Like she'd seen something that didn't happen. Todoroki's gaze kept flicking to corners like he expected reality to repeat. Bakugo was furious, but his fury had a tremor under it now, like he was fighting memories that didn't fit. And then the air shifted. Shigaraki stepped forward from the villain crowd, hand on his face, voice lazy and cold. Heroes sure love showing up, he muttered. Aizawa stood between them and the villains. Breathing hard, eyes narrowed. Then, the door behind the villains slammed open. Something massive stepped through. A creature like a nightmare given muscle and stitches. Nomu. It moved like a machine designed only for violence. Izuku's body went cold. Because the moment Nomu appeared, the air felt different. He didn't know how to explain it. But Chronoshift, usually restless, whispering, reactive, went quiet. Not calm. Quiet like an animal going still because it smelled a larger predator. Izuku's breath hitched. This felt like an anchor event. A welded point in the timeline. Something the universe wouldn't let him simply erase. Shigaraki tilted his head, voice cheerful in a sick way. All Might's coming, right? He asked. Then his gaze flicked, just briefly, toward Izuku. Not like a normal look. Like Shigaraki was looking through him. Like he could feel the stutter in Izuku's existence. Shigaraki's voice softened into amusement. "You're loud," he murmured. Izuku's stomach dropped. Aizawa's scarf tightened around his hands. Students trembled behind him. And Izuku realized the truth with terrible clarity. USJ wasn't just a villain attack. It was a test. Not for Class 1A. For him. For Chronoshift. For what the world did when a boy tried to rewrite it. Scene 1, when the symbol or everything after Nomu blurred into one long, screaming minute. The place. Oza shook as the stitched monster moved, fast, brutal, like it had been built for one purpose, to break the idea of heroes in front of children. Then the air changed. Not because of Chronoshift. Because of presence. A wind punched through the dome like a door kicked open. All Might landed with a force that made concrete tremble, blonde hair blazing, smile too wide for the fear in the air. "I am here." The words didn't just reassure, they rewrote the room's temperature. Students who'd been frozen with panic suddenly remembered how to breathe. Nomu lunged. All Might met it head on. Izuku watched, swaying on his feet, blood on his lip. Echoes dancing at the edges of his vision like insects around light. He didn't rewind. He couldn't. Not here. Not at this scale. Not against something that felt welded into the timeline. This wasn't a moment he could fix. This was an anchor. All Might traded blows with Nomu like thunder arguing with thunder. Each impact launched wind through the plaza. Shigaraki yelled at Nomu, frustrated. Voice cracking under the hand on his face. Kurogiri's mist swirled, protective. And then, like a scene snapping to the next page, Nomu was thrown back, Shigaraki was dragged away. And the villains began to retreat in a messy panic. Kurogiri's gates opened like wounds and swallowed them one by one. Before he vanished, Shigaraki's gaze flicked across the crowd. It stopped on Izuku. Just a blink of attention. But it felt like someone had touched the back of Izuku's neck with cold fingers. Then the mist closed. Silence crashed down. Izuku exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for a year. His knees gave out. And the present, finally safe, felt heavier than any rewind ever had. Scene 2, Recovery Girl doesn't treat secrets. UA's medical wing was bright enough to feel cruel. Beds lined the room. Students lay in them with scrapes, bruises, shock-thick eyes. Some were talking too loudly. Some were silent in the way people got silent after their world almost ended. Izuku sat on the edge of a bed. Legs dangling, hands clenched tight enough to hurt. Recovery Girl tapped his forehead with a finger. "Young man," she said, voice sharp like a scolding grandmother, "you're not bleeding from battle. You're bleeding from strain." Izuku flinched. She leaned closer, squinting. "How many times did you push your quirk today?" Izuku's mouth went dry. Don't lie," she snapped. "My job is to keep you alive, and your body is shouting at me." Izuku swallowed. His eyes flicked to the side. Aizawa stood near the doorway, arms crossed, face tired, scarf loosely wrapped. His hair was messier than usual and there was dried blood near his eye. But his gaze was steady. Watching. Recovery Girl sighed dramatically. "If you won't answer me, I'll answer for you. Too many." Izuku's cheeks burned. She pressed a small cloth to his nose. "Hold that. And eat. You look like your organs are filing complaints." Izuku nodded weakly. Recovery Girl turned away, muttering a boo. Reckless children and ridiculous quirks." Izuku stared at his hands. Across the room, Sue sat on a bed with her forearm wrapped. Mineta was shaking like a leaf, eyes huge, whispering to himself. "Anne. D. Uraraka stared at the ceiling like she was waiting for it to glitch. Izuku's throat tightened. He could feel it. The aftermath wasn't just bruises. It was memory. Scene 3, the students who blinked wrong. Later. After the worst injuries were treated, 13 and a few pro-heroes spoke to the class in a quieter room. Police officers stood near the doors, calm but alert. The kind of calm that came from knowing how bad things could get. A detective with tired eyes asked questions gently, like he understood these were children. "What do you remember?" he asked. "Anything unusual. Anything that can help." Students gave fractured answers. "Portals. Nomu. Aizawa-sensei. I thought I was going to die." Then the detective's gaze moved to Sue. She hesitated, throat bobbing. "Ribbit," she said softly. "I remember falling." The detective blinked. "You fell." Sue shook her head slowly. "No, I didn't. Her eyes flicked toward Izuku for a fraction of a second, then away. But I remember it anyway. The detective's expression tightened, not fear, but interest. Another student, Uraraka, spoke suddenly, voice small. I remember, screaming, she whispered. But then it was like, I hadn't screamed yet. A murmur rippled through the class. Iida stiffened. Are you saying, time? No, Aizawa cut in instantly, voice flat and absolute. You are saying trauma makes brains do strange things. That's all. His tone didn't leave space for debate. The detective nodded slowly, as if accepting that explanation because it was the safe one. But his eyes didn't stop thinking. Neither did Aizawa's. Izuku sat very still. His pulse thudded in his ears. Because Sue hadn't said, déjà vu. She hadn't said, dream. She'd said it like a witness describing evidence. I remember falling. Even though I didn't. Scene 4, the man in the holding cell. UA's security wasn't a normal police station. It was cleaner, quiet, heavier. Villains captured at the USJ were kept in reinforced holding rooms, while authorities sorted jurisdiction and transfer. One of those villains, a small-time thug with scarred knuckles and a cheap mask, sat slumped in a chair, wrists restrained. He looked ordinary, which made his smile wrong. A police officer stood outside the barrier, arms folded. Name. The villain tilted his head. Second, he said. The officer frowned. Second what? The villain's grin widened slightly. Eyes unfocused like he was watching something behind the wall. Second time, he whispered. I like the second time better. The officer's posture tightened. What are you talking about? He villain leaned forward as far as his restraints allowed, voice low and weirdly delighted. I saw it, he murmured. The frog girl goes under. The purple one screams. The green one, he paused, eyelids fluttering. The green one bleeds and the world snaps. The officer went still. Describe, he ordered, voice suddenly sharp. The villain chuckled. Like a clock choking. Like a film reel tearing. 1 second I'm laughing, then I'm laughing again, but the angle's different. The officer swallowed and tapped his radio. We've got a problem. Inside the cell, the villain hummed to himself, almost cheerful. They think it's just fear. He whispered. But I remember the version where she dies. The officer's eyes widened. You shouldn't, he muttered. The villain's grin returned, thin and knowing. Yeah, he said softly. That's what makes it fun. Scene 5, Aizawa connects the dots. Aizawa met Izuku in a quiet hallway outside the medical wing. No students. No noise. Just floors. Scent hum and the distant echo of footsteps. Aizawa's face looked more tired than ever. His voice was low. They caught one, he said. Izuku's stomach tightened. A villain. Aizawa nodded once. A low-level thug. Nothing special. Izuku didn't like the way Aizawa said nothing special. Aizawa's gaze pinned him. He described events that didn't happen, Aizawa said. Izuku's blood ran cold. Aizawa continued, calm and deadly serious. He described someone drowning, Aizawa said. Then described that same person not drowning. In detail. Like he watched both versions. Izuku's throat locked. Aizawa stepped closer, voice dropping further. Midoriya, he said, answer carefully. Izuku's hands trembled in his pockets. Aizawa's eyes didn't blink. Did you rewind near the villains? Izuku's mouth went dry. He could lie. He could pretend it was impossible. But Aizawa wasn't asking because he suspected he needed to know what kind of nightmare they were in. Izuku whispered, barely audible. Yes. Aizawa's jaw tightened. How many times? Izuku's breath shook. I don't know. A few. Maybe more. Aizawa exhaled through his nose, controlled. Then your quirk isn't just affecting your allies, Aizawa said. It's leaving fingerprints on your enemies. Izuku's stomach dropped. Aizawa's gaze sharpened. And that means, he said, someone could learn to exploit it. Izuku swallowed hard. I didn't mean. I know, Aizawa cut in. And for the first time his tone held something almost human. Intent doesn't matter to consequences. He paused. Then, All Might needs to know. Izuku flinched. He does. Aizawa's eyes narrowed slightly. How much? Izuku hesitated. Enough. Aizawa stared at him, measuring, then nodded once like he'd expected that. Good, Aizawa said. Because from this point on, you don't improvise with this quirk. Izuku's throat tightened. What do I do? Aizawa's voice was steel. You log everything, he said. You train only under supervision. And if you feel an echo. Izuku's breath hitched. Aizawa finished. You warn me before you act. Izuku nodded shakily. Aizawa leaned in just slightly, eyes sharp. In Midoriya, he said, if a villain can remember, hence someone out there might already be hunting you. Izuku's pulse spiked. Aizawa stepped back. Go rest, he said, like he hadn't just shoved the world into a darker shape. Izuku turned and walked away on unsteady legs, heart hammering. Because the fear wasn't theoretical anymore. It had a face in a holding cell. And it was smiling. Scene 6, Bakugo overhears, and the fire changes. Bakugo sat on a medical bed with a bandage across his shoulder, staring at nothing. His usual rage was there, but it was quieter. Denser. Like a storm cloud that hadn't decided where to strike. He heard voices in the hallway. A police officer murmuring to another. The guy keeps saying it happened twice. Bakugo's head snapped slightly. Describing the frog girl drowning. Bakugo's fingers curled. Says the green kid bleeds and the world snaps. Bakugo went very still. His eyes narrowed. Green kid. Blood. Snap. Bakugo's breath came slow, controlled, like he was trying not to explode in front of anyone. Something inside him, something that wasn't just anger, clicked into place. Because if a villain remembered, then Bakugo wasn't crazy. Then those fragments weren't just nightmares. Then the thing he'd felt, the wrongness, the skips, had a source. Bakugo's teeth clenched. Deku, he whispered, voice almost calm. And that calm was more dangerous than shouting. Scene 7, a doctor smiles somewhere far away. In a quiet lab beneath a place that didn't officially exist, Drive. Garaki listened to a report. He held a phone to his ear, posture relaxed, eyes bright behind his glasses. Yes, a voice said nervously. One of the USJ attackers. He's describing impossible sequence variants. Garaki's smile twitched. Wonderful, he murmured. The voice continued. We think it's trauma. Or delusion. Garaki's smile widened, still small, still cold. No, he corrected softly. It's neither. He tapped a file with one finger. Memory anchoring, he said, voice almost affectionate. The brain can be taught to cling to discontinuity. A pause. Garaki's eyes gleamed. Increase the dosage in the next batch, he said. If one remembers by accident, I want 10 to remember on purpose. The voice on the phone hesitated. Doctor, what about paradox feedback? Garaki chuckled. That's the point, he whispered. He ended the call and set the phone down. On his desk lay Izuku's file, now thicker, now marked with new notes. USJ incident, confirmed temporal event. Enemy memory retention, observed. Garaki leaned back and stared at the ceiling as if imagining a future only he could see. A boy who rewrites seconds, he murmured. His smile returned. And now, the world is starting to notice. Scene 1, school after the end of the world. UA looked the same. That was the first insult. The gates opened. Students walked. Teachers spoke. The sun shone over the campus like it hadn't watched villains try to murder kids under a fake sky. Class 1A filed into the room quieter than they'd ever been. Even Bakugo wasn't shouting. He sat down hard. Jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the window like he was daring the world to glitch again. Sue moved carefully, her wrapped arm held close. Mineta flinched at every sudden sound. Uraraka smiled at someone and it didn't reach her eyes. Todoroki's gaze kept drifting to corners, like he expected Kurogiri's fog to bloom out of them. Izuku took his seat and tried to pretend his body wasn't still trembling. Tried to pretend his head wasn't full of overlapping scenes. Tried to pretend he didn't feel time, itching under his skin. Aizawa walked in, looking worse than usual, like his exhaustion had finally become physical. He didn't greet them. He didn't soften. He just spoke. USJ was not training, Aizawa said. It was a real attack. Some of you froze. Some of you panicked. Some of you acted. His eyes moved across the room like a slow blade. You all survived, he continued. That doesn't mean you're fine. No one spoke. Aizawa's gaze paused, just a fraction, on Izuku. Starting today, Aizawa said. You will attend counseling if you're assigned. You will report symptoms. Nightmares. Deja vu. Anything. He paused. And you will not try to be brave by hiding what's wrong. Izuku swallowed. His fingers tightened on the edge of his desk. Aizawa's voice stayed flat, but the meaning beneath it was sharp. If something is happening, tell me. Izuku nodded once, tiny. Beck. He already knew something was happening. It wasn't just trauma. It was time bleeding into people like ink in water. Scene 2, the flash everyone shares. It happened during math. Of all things, math. Not combat training. Not rescue drills. Not an emergency. Just numbers on a board. Aizawa wasn't teaching. Another teacher had stepped in, calm and precise, chalk tapping. Izuku stared at the board, forcing himself to breathe slowly. Then his vision flickered. A sharp, sick stutter, like someone had plucked a frame out of reality. He saw it instantly. The teacher writing 12x plus 7. The chalk snapping. The teacher turning. And a student dropping their pencil at the exact same time Izuku's stomach lurched. Izuku blinked. The chalk didn't snap. The teacher didn't turn. The pencil didn't drop. But Izuku's body reacted anyway. Muscles tightening like he was bracing for impact. Across the room, Uraraka gasped softly. Todoroki's eyes widened a fraction. Ida's hand twitched mid-note. And Mineta squeaked, "I saw it." The room froze. The teacher paused, confused. What? A second later, like reality decided to prove it wasn't crazy. The chalk snapped. Exactly as Izuku had seen. The teacher flinched. A student's pencil dropped. Exactly as Izuku had seen. Uraraka jerked, startled. Mineta yelped. Todoroki's gaze sharpened like he'd been slapped awake. The teacher stared at the broken chalk in their hand, frowning. "What is wrong with you all?" they demanded. No one answered. Because the problem wasn't the chalk. It was the way half the class had reacted before the event happened. Like they'd all seen the same echo. Izuku's blood went cold. He felt it, stronger than ever, like chronoshift had left a residue in the air, and now the room was breathing it in. His ears rang. His stomach twisted. And for the first time, Izuku realized the nightmare wasn't just that he could rewrite moments. The nightmare was that the rewritten moments were now writing back. Scene 3, time lag. Lunch was too loud. Not because people were Shoutku's senses were slipping out of sync. He heard laughter a fraction too late. He saw a hand move, then heard the sound it made after. Someone called his name, Midoriya. And his body turned before the voice reached him. It was like living half a step ahead of the present. Or half a step behind it. He couldn't tell which. He tried to eat. His stomach rejected it, rolling with nausea. His hands shook so badly he spilled water on the table. A drop of water slid toward the edge. Izuku's brain screamed a command automatically. Go back. His throat tightened, stopping the word from leaving his mouth. He clenched his fists under the table until his nails bit skin. No rewinds. Not here. Not in front of everyone. Not after the synchronized echo. He stood abruptly and walked out. Ignoring the confused looks, he made it to an empty hallway before his knees buckled slightly. Izuku leaned against the wall, breathing hard. The air felt thick. Wrong. Then the hallway flickered. Not visually, internally. A sudden stack of images pressed into his mind. Sue falling into water. Sue not falling. Aizawa collapsing. Aizawa lunging forward. Kurogiri's gate opening. Kurogiri's gate closing. All at once, Izuku pressed his palm to his forehead, teeth clenched, fighting the urge to vomit. Echo sickness. It wasn't a metaphor anymore. It was a physical illness, his brain trying to process multiple, almost histories, at once. His nose bled suddenly, warm and bright. He wiped it hard, and whispered, shaking, I didn't even use it. Time didn't care. It had started moving around him differently, whether he commanded it or not. Scene 4, the first trust fracture. After class, Sue found him near the stairs. She didn't hop. She didn't smile. She stood with her hands folded. Posture tense, like she'd rehearsed being calm. Midoriya, she said quietly. Ribbit. Izuku froze. Uraraka stood beside her, fingers twisting together. Iida was there too, stiff as a guard, glasses catching light. Not a mob. A small group. A small group that had survived together. That made it worse. Sue's eyes stayed on Izuku. We saw something, she said. At USJ. Uraraka swallowed. I felt like I screamed twice. Iida's voice was controlled, but tight. Several of us reacted before events occurred today. That is not normal. Izuku's throat went dry. He felt chronoshift stir like a snake under his ribs. Uraraka stepped forward half a step, voice softer. "Midoriya," she said, "did you do something back there?" Izuku's mouth opened. No sound came out, because if he told them the truth, he was putting a target on them too. But if he lied, he'd be lying to people who had stood in the same disaster with him. Sue's gaze sharpened. "I'm not accusing you," she said, voice low. "I just want to understand." Izuku's hands trembled. He forced words out, careful and incomplete. "My quirk," he swallowed. "It affects timing. Sometimes I can create a pause." Iida stiffened. "A pause?" Uraraka's eyes widened. Like stopping things." Izuku nodded once, minimal. Sue stared at him, then whispered, "Did you rewind?" Izuku flinched like he'd been slapped. Uraraka sucked in a breath. Iida's posture went rigid. "Rewind is..." A voice cut in from behind them, sharp and venomous. "I knew it. Bakugo." He stood at the end of the hallway, eyes blazing, expression stead like rage and fear had fused into something uglier. "You're messing with time," Bakugo snarled. "That's why it felt wrong. That's why I..." His voice cracked for half a second, and the crack was terrifying because it sounded like weakness. Bakugo stepped forward fast. Izuku's heart slammed. Chronoshift rose up like instinct. "Rewind. Stop this. Fix it. Say the perfect words." Bakugo grabbed Izuku's collar hard and yanked him close. "How many times?" Bakugo hissed. "How many times did I die, Deku?" Uraraka gasped. Sue reached out, hesitated. Iida barked, "Bakugo. Release him immediately." Bakugo didn't listen. Izuku's vision flickered. Echoes stacked. Bakugo's fist landing. Bakugo's fist landing again. Bakugo screaming. Bakugo silent. Izuku rewinding. Izuku rewinding. Izuku's throat tightened. He could feel the word forming in his mouth. "Go back." Then a scarf snapped around Bakugo's wrist like a whip. Bakugo's arm jerked away from Izuku. Aizawa stepped into the hallway like a shadow that had decided to become solid. "Enough," Aizawa said. Bakugo snarled, trying to pull free, but Aizawa's capture weapon tightened just enough to remind him that rage didn't beat restraint. Aizawa's eyes locked onto Bakugo. "If you want to fight," Aizawa said, voice flat, "do it in training where I can stop you from ruining your life." Bakugo's teeth clenched. Then Aizawa's gaze slid to Izuku. For half a second, there was a silent message in those tired eyes. Don't rewind this." Izuku swallowed hard. His hands shook at his sides. Uraraka stared at Izuku like she'd just realized his fear wasn't normal fear. Sue looked pale. Iida's expression had gone tight and complicated, logic wrestling with horror. Bakugo spat, voice low and vicious, "You're a freak." Izuku flinched, because Bakugo wasn't entirely wrong. Aizawa cut the moment in half with one sentence. "All of you," Aizawa said, "to my office." Now. No one argued. And as they walked, Izuku realized something irreversible had happened. Even if he never rewound again, they would never look at him the same way. Scene 5, Aizawa's office, rules written in steel. Aizawa's office smelled like black coffee and tired paper. He shut the door and stared at the four students like he was weighing which truth would do the least damage. Then he spoke. "Midoriya's quirk," Aizawa said, "has unusual side effects." Bakugo scoffed. "Unusual. It's..." Aizawa's eyes flicked to him. "Shut up." Bakugo actually did. Aizawa continued, voice calm but absolute. "You are not entitled to someone else's quirk details," Aizawa said. "Not even if you're scared." Bakugo's jaw clenched. Aizawa's gaze moved to Uraraka and Iida and Sue. "What you experienced," Aizawa said, "could be trauma. Or it could be a side effect of proximity to a quirk that alters perception and timing." He looked at Izuku. "And that quirk is being managed." Izuku's throat tightened. "Managed. Like a hazard." Aizawa's tone sharpened. "From now on," he said, "you do not confront Midoriya alone. You report symptoms to me. If you experience flash memories, you write them down and bring them to me." He paused. "And Midoriya," Aizawa said quietly, "you do not use your quirk around classmates unless I authorize it." Quote. Izuku nodded shakily. Bakugo stared at the floor, hands clenched like he was holding back a detonation. Uraraka's voice was small. "Is he dangerous?" The question hurt more than a punch. Aizawa didn't soften it with lies. He could be, Aizawa said. If he panics. If he loses control. If he starts chasing perfect. Izuku swallowed hard, shame burning his throat. Aizawa's eyes narrowed slightly. But so could any of you, he added. If you let fear drive you. Silence. Aizawa sighed, rubbing his eyes. Go, he said. All of you. And try to sleep. They filed out one by one. Bakugo left last. He paused at the door, not looking back. Tick-tock, he muttered under his breath. Izuku's stomach dropped. Bakugo didn't even know why he said it. That made it worse. Scene 6, a message that doesn't feel like a coincidence. That night, Izuku opened his logbook with shaking hands. He wrote, Entry, Echo Sickness. Multiple classmates experienced shared pre-event flashes, synchronized echo. Increased time lag in perception, audio delay, motion desync. Nosebleed without active use. Trust fracture event. Confrontation with by triggered involuntary rewind. He stared at the words until they blurred. Then he heard a soft tap at his window. Izuku froze. Another tap. He moved slowly, pulling the curtain aside. Nothing outside but night and distant streetlight glow. No bird. No person. Just darkness. He opened the window anyway, hand trembling. A folded piece of paper sat on the sill like it had always been there. Izuku's breath caught. He picked it up, unfolded it with careful fingers. 2 words, written in clean, unfamiliar handwriting. I remember. Izuku's blood turned to ice. He scanned the street. Nothing. He looked at the paper again. Under the words was a simple mark, almost like a clock hand, or a slash. And beneath that, the message that made his stomach drop into his shoes. Tick. Izuku's hands started shaking. Because this didn't feel like a prank. It felt like proof. Proof that someone out there wasn't just noticing the stutters. They were counting them. Scene 1, paper that feels like a threat. Izuku didn't sleep. He sat on his bed with the note in his hands until the paper warmed from his grip, staring at the words like they might rearrange themselves into something less horrifying. I remember. Tick. His brain tried to reason it away. A prank. A coincidence. Bakugo being Bakugo. But the handwriting wasn't Bakugo's. Too neat. Too calm. And the note hadn't been shoved under his door or tossed through the window like a normal threat. It had been placed. Like someone had stepped into the exact point where he would find it. Like they knew the rhythm of his life well enough to time it. Izuku swallowed hard, nose still sore from the earlier bleed. He touched his upper lip. No blood now, but the pressure behind his eyes was building again, slow and steady like a storm gathering. Chronoshift didn't whisper. It waited. He looked at the clock. 3:17. His stomach churned. His mother was asleep down the hall. He couldn't wake her. Couldn't drag her into a nightmare built from seconds. He folded the note carefully, put it in his logbook, and stared at the cover like he'd just placed evidence of a crime inside it. Because he had. Then, quietly, like a prayer he didn't believe in, he whispered. Please, let this be nothing. The air didn't answer. Time didn't answer. And the silence felt like a countdown. Scene 2, Aizawa doesn't ask twice. Izuku brought the note to school in his pocket like it was radioactive. The whole day felt wrong, like the hallways had eyes, like every flicker of fluorescent light was a stutter waiting to happen. He made it through homeroom. Barely. Then he approached Aizawa's desk when the other students were filing out. Aizawa didn't look up. Speak, he said, voice flat. Izuku slid the folded note onto the desk. Aizawa's eyes lifted. He unfolded it once, read it, and his posture changed, not much. But enough that Izuku felt the shift like a temperature drop. Aizawa's gaze snapped to Izuku's face. Where did you find this? He asked. On my window, Izuku whispered. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. Window. Not mailbox. Not door. Izuku swallowed. Yes. Aizawa stood so fast his chair scraped. He walked to the classroom door, opened it, and looked both ways down the hallway Ike expected someone to be standing there smiling. No one was. Aizawa closed the door and turned back. His voice lowered. Did anyone see you find it? He asked. Izuku shook his head. Aizawa stared at the note again. Then said something that made Izuku's stomach drop. This isn't a prank. Izuku's throat tightened. How do you know? Aizawa tapped the paper once with a finger. Because whoever wrote this isn't trying to scare you. Aizawa said. They're trying to tell you they're inside your pattern. Izuku's skin prickled. Aizawa's gaze sharpened. And because, I remember, isn't a threat why? I'd make unless you knew exactly what you were saying. Izuku swallowed hard. What do we do? Aizawa's answer was immediate. You don't go anywhere alone, he said. Not on campus, not off. Izuku blinked. Aizawa continued, voice hard. You will be escorted. You will report anything unusual, any flicker, any echo, any message, any person paying too much attention. Izuku's hands trembled. Aizawa-sensei. Aizawa cut him off. This is no longer a quirk management issue, Aizawa said. This is a security issue. He turned and grabbed his phone. And I'm calling All Might. Scene 3, All Might's face without the poster. They met in a staff room that smelled like coffee and old paperwork. All Might arrived in his thin form, Toshinori, shoulders hunched, eyes sharp in a way posters never showed. When Aizawa handed him the note, Toshinori read it once. Then his face changed. Not anger. Not fear. Recognition. Like he had seen this shape of danger before. Aizawa watched him closely. You knew this could happen. Toshinori's eyes didn't leave the paper. There are people, he said quietly, voice heavy, who collect rare quirks. Izuku's chest tightened. Toshinori looked up at Izuku. His eyes softened. Midoriya, he said. Listen to me carefully. Izuku nodded, throat tight. If someone says they remember, Toshinori swallowed. Then they've either experienced your quirk's side effects. Or they have a method to anchor memory through discontinuity. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. Like those villains at USJ. Toshinori nodded once. Aizawa's expression darkened. So someone is intentionally inducing memory retention. Izuku's stomach turned. Toshinori placed the note on the table like it was a small bomb. We tighten UA's perimeter, Toshinori said. We increase patrol rotations. We check camera logs. We trace paper origin if possible. Aizawa's gaze sharpened. And we keep Midoriya under watch. Izuku flinched at the phrasing. Toshinori's eyes softened again. Protection, he corrected gently. Not surveillance. Aizawa grunted, as if that distinction didn't change the reality of it. Then Aizawa asked the question Izuku had been dreading. Midoriya, Aizawa said, did you use your quirk last night? Izuku shook his head. No. Toshinori's brow furrowed. And the echo sickness. Izuku swallowed hard. It's getting worse. Toshinori's eyes darkened. Aizawa leaned forward slightly. Describe. Izuku hesitated. Then forced it out. I feel, out of sync, Izuku whispered. Like sound comes late. Like I see things a fraction early. Like my brain is running a step ahead of reality. Aizawa's gaze sharpened. Time lag. Izuku nodded. Toshinori's face tightened. That means your quirk is active even when you're not commanding it. Izuku's stomach dropped. Aizawa's voice turned cold. Which means, he said. You're leaking. Izuku flinched hard. Toshinori looked pained. But he didn't deny it. Scene 4, The Debt. That night, UA security felt thicker. More guards. More cameras. More eyes. Izuku walked with an escort. He hated it. He hated how it made him feel like a walking hazard sign. He hated how his classmates looked at him now, like they were trying to decide whether they should feel sorry for him or fear him. He went to bed early anyway. Tried to. The moment he closed his eyes, his brain flooded him with echoes. Not single flashes. Full sequences. He saw a pencil fall. He saw it fall again. He saw himself turning left, turning right, turning left again. He saw a future where his mother opened the door to a stranger. He saw the stranger's smile. Izuku jolted upright, sweating. His heart hammered. His nose bled instantly. He stumbled to the bathroom, hands shaking, and stared at himself in the mirror. His eyes looked wrong. Not glowing. Not dramatic. Tired in a way that didn't belong to a teenager. He pressed tissue to his nose. And whispered, shaking. I didn't even rewind. But his body acted like he had. Like time had demanded payment. All Might's warning. If you chase perfect, you'll destroy yourself. Now the twist was worse. Even resisting perfect was costing him. Like the universe was keeping score. Izuku swallowed blood and bitterness and fear. Is this a debt? He whispered. His reflection didn't answer. But behind his eyes, chronoshift pulsed. Not like a tool. Like a hunger. Scene 5, The Hourglass Signal. 3 days passed. No new notes. No direct threats. But the echo sickness kept escalating. Izuku started seeing micro-echoes constantly, someone turning their head a second before they did. A door opening twice. A laugh arriving early. And then it happened. During a simple hallway walk, Izuku blinked. And the world froze. Not his stop field. Not his command. The hallway didn't become still like a bubble. It became still like a photograph. Students were mid-step. A laugh was half-formed. A book hung in the air, just barely tilted. Izuku's breath hitched. He couldn't move. He couldn't speak. He could only see. And in that frozen frame of reality, he saw something impossible. A faint symbol appeared on the glass of a nearby display case. Like condensation forming a shape. Two triangles touching at their points. An hourglass. Izuku's heart slammed. The symbol darkened for a second, then the world snapped back into motion. Sound returned like a wave. Students kept walking like nothing happened. Izuku staggered, hands shaking. He spun toward the glass. The symbol was gone, but he'd seen it. Not an echo of a random event. A message. A signal inside a time lock. A way of speaking that only someone who could touch discontinuity would think to use. Izuku's stomach turned violently. He pressed a hand to the wall. Because the implication was monstrous. Whoever was watching him wasn't just leaving notes. They were using time itself as a delivery system. And if they could freeze him without his consent, then chronoshift wasn't fully his. Or something else was reaching into it. Scene 6, Aizawa makes a choice. Izuku reported the hallway freeze immediately. Aizawa didn't dismiss it. He didn't call it stress. He listened, eyes narrowing deeper with every detail. When Izuku finished describing the hourglass symbol, Aizawa went silent. Then he said, "All Might stays on campus tonight." Izuku's throat tightened. "Is it that bad?" Aizawa looked at him, expression hard. "It's worse," he said. Izuku's hands trembled. "What do you mean?" Aizawa's voice dropped low. "Because a person who can leave a symbol inside a forced time lock isn't just observing you," he said. "They're testing control." Izuku swallowed hard. Aizawa's gaze pinned him. "And if they can trigger a freeze without your consent, then your quirk is no longer just a danger to you." Izuku's breathing shook. Aizawa continued, flat and brutal. "It's a danger to everyone near you." Quote. Izuku flinched like he'd been struck. Aizawa's voice didn't soften. "That doesn't mean you're guilty," he said. "It means the situation is escalating." He stood. "From now on, you train in a controlled environment," Aizawa said. "With me and All Might present." Izuku nodded shakily. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. "And Midoriya," he said quietly, "if the hourglass shows up again." Izuku's throat tightened. Aizawa finished. "You do not resist it alone. You call for help immediately." Izuku nodded. Aizawa turned toward the door. Then paused. His voice lowered to something almost human. "Because time manipulation doesn't just break timelines," Aizawa said. "It breaks people." He left. Izuku stood alone in the room, breathing hard. His head throbbed. His nose bled again. And in the back of his mind, the hourglass symbol glowed like an omen. Tick. Scene 1, the room built for mistakes. UA had rooms that looked like classrooms. And then it had rooms that looked like warnings. Training Ground Beta's underground annex wasn't flashy. No stadium lights. No cheering stands. Just reinforced walls, layered insulation, cameras embedded like eyes, and a floor arcade with grid lines that made everything feel measurable. Like a laboratory. Izuku stood at the entrance with his hands at his sides, trying not to shake. Aizawa was already inside, scarf coiled, paws. Touré relaxed in the way predators looked relaxed. All Might, Toshinori today, thin form, leaned against a console with power loader, who was tapping through system menus with clawed fingers. Recovery Girl was there too, arms folded. Expression sharp enough to cut steel. "Let me guess," she said, eyeing Izuku. "You're going to do something stupid and call it training." All Might winced. "It's controlled." Recovery Girl snorted. "Controlled is what people say right before a child passes out." Izuku swallowed hard. Aizawa spoke, voice flat. "We do this now because the alternative is him collapsing during real combat." Recovery Girl's glare shifted to Aizawa. "And if he collapses in here?" Aizawa didn't blink. "Then we learn the boundary without civilians dying." Silence. Power loader cleared his throat, metallic and awkward. Sensors are calibrated. We'll record field distortion, micro latency, and whatever the heck the stutter is. Izuku's stomach turned at how casually they said it. LL Might pushed off the console and walked toward Izuku. His eyes weren't the symbol's smile. They were a mentor's fear, heavy and careful. Midoriya, he said softly, you're not proving anything today. Izuku nodded quickly. All Might continued, you are measuring. And you will stop the moment we tell you to stop. Izuku's throat tightened. Yes, sir. Aizawa's gaze sharpened. And you will stop the moment your body tells you to stop. He added. Izuku hesitated, then nodded again. Recovery girl clicked her tongue. Good. Because I'm not stitching up your brain. Power loader pointed at the center of the floor. Stand on the mark. Izuku walked forward. The grid lines under his shoes felt like a cage. Scene 2, the smallest rewind. Power loader rolled a simple metal ball onto the floor. It looked harmless. A toy. That's our object, Power loader said. No biological targets. No living systems. Recovery girl nodded approvingly, like at least they weren't complete idiots. All Might lifted a stopwatch. We'll time the event. Quote. Aizawa stood a few meters away, eyes on Izuku like a weight. Start with a 2-second rewind, Aizawa said. Izuku's mouth went dry. 2. Aizawa cut him off. You've already done more under stress. Now you do less under control. Izuku nodded. Power loader tapped a button. A small display lit up, numbers scrolling, baseline readings. All right, All Might said gently. We dropped the ball. You rewind. Only once. Power loader lifted the ball and dropped it from chest height. It fell. It hit the floor. It bounced once. The sound was crisp, simple, real. Izuku inhaled. He focused on the moment like grabbing a rope. And whispered. Go back. Reality snapped. Not violently, this time it was smoother. Still wrong. Still like a film reel rewound too fast. But smoother. The ball was midair again, falling. It hit the floor again. Bounced again. All Might clicked the stopwatch, eyes narrowed. Power loader stared at his sensors. Field distortion confirmed. Latency spike. Recovery girl stepped closer and grabbed Izuku's wrist, checking his pulse like she wanted to punch time itself for existing. You okay? She demanded. Izuku nodded quickly, though his head throbbed. A little dizzy. He admitted. Aizawa's eyes didn't move. Nose. Izuku touched it. No blood yet. Just pressure. Okay, Izuku whispered. All Might's shoulders loosened a fraction. Good. We keep it small. Power loader nodded. We'll do 3 seconds next. Izuku swallowed. He stared at the ball like it was a trap. And somewhere deep inside, Chronoshift flexed, pleased. Like it liked. Which terrified him more than the pain ever had. Scene 3, the line that won't move. They repeated the test. 3 seconds. A little more snap. A little more dizziness. A thin nosebleed that wreck. Ovary girl wiped angrily like she was offended by physics. 4 seconds. Izuku's vision flickered briefly, echoes at the edges, but he held steady. Power loader's sensors went crazy with graphs and spikes. It's consistent. Power loader muttered. Distortion bubble centered on Midoriya. It's like he's pulling local state backward. All Might nodded slowly, thinking. Aizawa spoke without looking away from Izuku. 5 seconds. Izuku's throat tightened. Okay. Power loader dropped the ball again. It fell, bounced. Izuku whispered, go back. Snap. The ball replayed. Again. All Might watched the stopwatch, then frowned slightly. Power loader frowned harder. Power loader said. That's weird. All Might's eyes narrowed. What? Power loader tapped the sensor display. The rewind happened, but the distortion curve didn't match the previous ones. Aizawa's voice sharpened. Explain. Power loader swallowed. It's like, it resisted. Like the pull met friction. Izuku's stomach turned. He hadn't felt resistance before. All Might stepped closer. Midoriya, did it feel different? Izuku hesitated, then nodded slowly. It felt heavier. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. Try 6 seconds. Recovery girl snapped, absolutely not. Aizawa didn't look at her. We stop if he bleeds heavily. We stop if he collapses. But we need to find the boundary before someone else forces it on him. Recov. Rai girl glared like she wanted to throw her shoe at him. But she didn't argue again. Izuku's heart pounded. Power loader dropped the ball. It fell. Bounced. Izuku focused, harder, jaw clenched. Go back. The world snapped. And stuck. For half a second, Izuku felt it. Something caught in the rewind like a hook snagging cloth. The ball didn't return to midair. It jittered on the floor. Like it tried to rewind but couldn't commit. The air around Izuku shimmered violently. His vision exploded with echoes, 10 versions of the ball dropping, bouncing, rolling away, stacked like broken glass. Pain detonated behind his eyes. Izuku gasped. His nose bled instantly, hot and fast. Recovery Girl cursed and grabbed his shoulders. All Might's voice sharpened. Stop. Midoriya, stop. Izuku tried to release the pull. But Chronoshift didn't let go cleanly. It dragged. It resisted. Like time itself was refusing to be edited past a certain point. Izuku staggered, choking on nausea. Then the room, the entire room, thumped. Not sound. A pressure wave. Like reality kicked back. Power Loader's sensors screamed. The cameras flickered. The lights dimmed for a heartbeat. And every person in the room flinched. All Might's hand tightened on the console like he'd almost fallen. Aizawa's eyes narrowed sharply, but even he looked briefly, unsteady. Recovery Girl sucked in a breath and muttered, "Oh, that is not normal." Izuku's knees buckled. All Might caught him before he hit the floor. Izuku's ears rang. His vision swam. And in the middle of the migraine storm, one clear thought surfaced like a knife. There's a line I can't cross. A boundary in time that wasn't about his stamina. It was about the world saying no. Scene 4, Paradox Shockwave. All Might lowered Izuku onto a padded bench. Recovery GI. RL pressed gauze to his nose with enough force to make him hiss. Breathe, she ordered. Slow. If you pass out, I'm telling your mother you're grounded for life. Izuku nodded shakily, half laughing, half dying. Power Loader was hunched over the console, eyes wide. That wasn't just strain, Power Loader murmured. That was feedback. Aizawa's gaze was razor sharp. Define it. Power Loader swallowed. It's like the rewind tried to override a state that's anchored. And the system corrected. All Might's voice was quiet. An anchor moment. Aizawa's eyes narrowed, meaning there are points in time that resist alteration. All Might nodded slowly. Or, points with too much weight. Too many dependencies. Izuku's stomach churned. Like fate, he whispered. Aizawa's response was immediate. No. Then, after a pause. Softer but still flat. Like cause and effect. Recovery Girl scoffed. Whatever you call it, his body is paying interest. Izuku pressed a hand to his temple, trying not to vomit. And then he realized something worse. All Might was staring at Aizawa. Aizawa was staring at the wall. Both of them looked unsettled in a specific way. Izuku swallowed. What? Aizawa's voice was low. That pressure wave. Power Loader nodded quickly. Paradox shock. It didn't stay centered on him, it spread. Recovery Girl muttered, I felt it in my teeth. All Might's eyes tightened. So did I. Izuku's blood went cold. Spread. That meant the echo sickness wasn't just proximity to his quirk. It was exposure to paradox feedback. If he pushed against an anchor moment in public, the Hawkwave could wash over everyone nearby. And maybe, imprint them. Maybe make them remember. Maybe make them sick. Izuku's hands started shaking again. Aizawa's gaze pinned him. Which is why, Aizawa said. You do not push longer rewinds again. Izuku swallowed hard. What if I have to? Aizawa's eyes were hard. Then you're already in a scenario where the best outcome doesn't exist. The words hit like a punch. All Might leaned closer, voice gentle but firm. Midoriya, he said, you need to understand what we just learned. Izuku nodded, breathing shallow. All Might raised 2 fingers. Oh, nay, your quirk can rewind short durations reliably. Izuku's throat tightened. 2, All Might continued, there are anchor states that resist rewinding. If you force it. Power Loader finished, voice shaking. Reality kicks you. Recovery Girl grunted. And reality kicks everyone nearby, apparently. All Might nodded grimly. Exactly. Izuku stared at his bloodied gauze. If he couldn't rewind anchor moments, then there were deaths he might not be able to undo. Then there were mistakes time would refuse to forgive. And the worst part, somebody out there had already started testing him. The hourglass symbol. The forced freeze. The note. They weren't just watching. They were probing his boundaries. Just like this test. Scene 5, the hourglass returns. Power Loader was still scrolling through logs when the lights flickered again. Not a full dim, just a blink. Aizawa's posture stiffened instantly. All Might's head snapped up. Izuku felt it too, the hook in his chest, the wrongness in the air, like Time's skin was being pinched. Then, everything froze. Not stop field. Not a bubble. A full room stillness. The exact same forced stillness Izuku had experienced in the hallway. Only now it hit all of them. Recovery Girl's hand was mid-press against Izuku's nose. All Might was half-turned. Power Loader's claws hovered over the console. Aizawa's scarf was suspended mid-sway. And in the frozen air, a faint shimmer appeared in front of the far wall. A symbol formed like condensation again. Two triangles touching. An hourglass. Then, under it, new writing, thin, clean, calm. Good. You found the edge. Izuku's heart slammed in his chest, but his body couldn't move. He could only stare. Because this wasn't an echo. This was a message delivered inside a time lock. Aizawa's eyes, still frozen open, were locked on the same words. All Might's gaze was too. They could see it too. The freeze snapped off. Sound returned like a punch. Recovery Girl stumbled, catching herself, breathing hard. What the? Power Loader swore loudly. All Might's face went pale. Aizawa moved first, instinctively, stepping between Izuku and the wall like you could block 80. His eyes swept the room, scarf twitching. Security breach, Aizawa said sharply. Power Loader slammed a button. No doors opened. No motion sensors triggered. All Might's voice was low and deadly. Then it's not a physical breach. Izuku's mouth trembled. They froze all of you. Recovery Girl snapped. Don't narrate it like it's normal. Izuku flinched. Aizawa's gaze locked onto Izuku. Midoriya, did you trigger that? Izuku shook his head hard. No. Aizawa didn't relax. Because it wasn't about believing Izuku. It was about believing the room. And the room had just been violated by something that didn't need doors. All Might clenched his fists. Voice shaking with controlled fury. Someone can access the same layer of time you can, he whispered. Power Loader stared at the fading shimmer on the wall like it might return. Or someone has a tool that hooks into it. Power Loader murmured. Recovery Girl's jaw clenched. Either way, they're treating my medical wing's worst patient like a science project. Izuku's stomach turned. Because the message had said the word that made his blood run cold. Edge. They were mapping him. Not as a person. As a boundary. A limit. A weapon waiting to be shaped. Scene 6, Aizawa's new rule. Aizawa turned to All Might. We move him, Aizawa said. All Might blinked. To where? Aizawa's voice was flat. Somewhere the hourglass can't reach. Power Loader swallowed. If it can force a time lock in a sealed UA. Training Annex, where exactly is, can't reach. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. Then we build it. All Might's jaw tightened. Recovery Girl pointed a finger at Izuku. And what about him? He's bleeding, he's nauseous. And now he's terrified. Izuku swallowed hard, throat burning. Aizawa looked at Izuku for a long moment. Then he said the one thing Izuku didn't expect. This isn't your fault. Izuku's chest tightened painfully. Aizawa's voice stayed harsh, but the meaning underneath it was steady. But it is your responsibility, Aizawa continued. So here is your new rule. Izuku nodded shakily. Aizawa's eyes pinned him. If you feel an involuntary freeze coming, if the air hooks your chest, if your vision flickers like the hallway. Izuku's breath hitched. Aizawa finished. You say it out loud immediately. No matter who is watching. Izuku stared. But, he whispered, if I say it out loud, everyone will know. Aizawa's voice cut like steel. Good, he said. Let them know. Because the moment you hide, you become isolated. And isolation is how predators win. Silence. All Might nodded slowly, grim. Recovery Girl sighed like she hated agreeing with Aizawa, which meant she definitely agreed. Izuku's hands trembled. He nodded. Yes, sir. Aizawa turned away, scarf tightening like a decision. Power Loader, he said, pull every log. Every flicker. Every sensor anomaly. Power Loader nodded fast. All Might, Aizawa said, we're escalating this. All Might's eyes hardened. Understood. Izuku sat on the bench, gauze at his nose, migraine roaring, staring at T. He fading place where the hourglass had been. He couldn't stop thinking about one phrase. Good. You found the edge. Because if they knew his edge, Then they were going to push him to it. Soon. And next time, it wouldn't be in a training room. It would be in the real world, where the cost of resisting perfect wasn't just pain. It was people. Scene 1, the decoy pattern. UA didn't announce its security changes. It moved differently. Hallway patrol routes shifted by minutes. Cameras were quietly recalibrated. Doors that used to open with a casual swipe now demanded a second confirmation. Teachers, who normally vanished between classes, appeared in corners like shadows with ids. And Izuku. Izuku stopped being a student who needs help. He became a schedule. Aizawa built the plan like he built everything, brutally practical. You're going to live by a pattern, he told Izuku in a quiet briefing room. Not because it's safe, because it's bait. All Might stood beside him, arms folded, face grim. Power loaders monitors displayed clock graphs and sensor readouts like they were watching a heartbeat on life support. Izuku swallowed. What pattern? Aizawa slid a paper across the table. It was a timetable. 8:10, escorted route to class. 12:40, supervised lunch. 15:20, controlled training, Annex B. 1700, escorted exit. Half of this is real, Aizawa said. Half is a lie. Izuku stared. So we're tricking them. Aizawa's eyes didn't blink. We're giving them a predictable target and watching where they touch it. All Might's voice was gentle, but heavy. If the hourglass is using time locks to communicate, they might respond to routine. If we alter routine, he exhaled, we might catch the moment they reach in. Recovery Girl had said it best, earlier, with a scowl. People who play with time hate surprises. That's why they cause them. Izuku's hands trembled. And if they don't bite? Aizawa's gaze sharpened. Then we escalate the lure. Izuku's stomach dropped. Escalate? How? Aizawa tapped the schedule. At 15:20, he said. You will appear to be alone for 30 seconds. Izuku's breath hitched. All Might's jaw tightened. You won't actually be alone. Aizawa added. Flat. But they won't know that. Izuku stared at the paper like it was a death sentence disguised as planning. He nodded anyway. Because if someone was already touching his time, waiting didn't make him safer. It just made the predator more patient. Scene 2, the hourglass laughs. 15:20 arrived like a held breath. Training Annex B's corridor was empty on purpose, quiet, clean, lit too brightly. The escorting pro hero, a UA security staff member, stopped at a junction where cameras overlapped and nodded. This is the point, he murmured. Izuku's throat was dry. Right. He stepped forward. 1 step. 2. For the first time in days, his body didn't feel like it was being watched by eyes. It felt like it was being watched by seconds. He reached the marked spot, exactly where the plan said he would, be alone. And the air hooked his chest. Hard. Izuku's vision sharpened violently. His ears filled with static. He remembered Aizawa's rule and forced the words out immediately, loud and raw. Freeze incoming. The escort snapped his head up, hand reaching for his radio. At the same moment, the corridor went still. Not just still. Dead. Sound flattened. Light stopped flickering. Dust froze mid-air like glitter trapped in glass. Izuku couldn't move, but he could see. A faint shimmer formed on the wall ahead of him, right where a safety poster was mounted. The hourglass symbol appeared. Then words wrote themselves beneath it, calm and clean. You set a trap. A second line appeared. Good. A third line. But you can't hide inside a lie. Izuku's heart hammered against ribs that wouldn't move. Then, beneath the words, a final message blinked into existence like a knife tip catching light. 15:47. Outside the gates. Bring your edge. The freeze snapped off. Air rushed back like a wave. The escort swore and grabbed Izuku's shoulder. Midoriya, did you see that? Izuku nodded, breathing hard. Yes. Aizawa's voice barked through the escort's radio instantly, like he'd been listening to the corridor itself. Repeat everything, Aizawa ordered. Now. Izuku's mouth trembled. He didn't like that the hourglass had called the trap good. He didn't like that it had given a time. And he liked least of all the phrase, bring your edge, because it wasn't a threat. It was an invitation to fail in a very specific way. Scene 3, the crisis that isn't random. 15:44. 3 minutes before the time in the message. UA's emergency alert system didn't, short, controlled, official. Aizawa stood at the front of Class 1A with his phone in hand, eyes narrowed. "We have an incident," he said. The class stiffened instantly. Uraraka's fingers clenched. Sue's posture tightened. Iida sat perfectly straight like discipline could block fear. Bakugo's eyes narrowed, as if he'd been waiting for the world to prove him right. All Might, thin form, stood near the door, face grim. "Outside the gates?" Izuku asked before he could stop himself. Aizawa's gaze snapped to him. "Yes," Aizawa said flatly. "A civilian disturbance, reported as a minor hostage situation, near the outer road." Izuku felt his stomach drop. Minor. That word didn't exist when time got involved. Aizawa's eyes were hard. "Listen carefully. This could be bait. No one moves alone. No heroics. No improvisation." Izuku swallowed. "Sensei." Aizawa cut him off. "You are not leaving campus." Izuku's pulse spiked. "But it's." All Might's voice came in low and firm. "Midoriya, if the hourglass is calling you out, you going is exactly what they want." Izuku's nails dug into his palm. He knew they were right. He also knew what the message had said. 1547. Outside the gates. The universe had just arranged a minor hostage situation, at the exact time and place the hourglass demanded. There was no coincidence big enough to hold that. Aizawa turned to the class. "You're staying put." Then he looked at Izuku like he could see the argument forming inside him. "You're staying with me," Aizawa added. Izuku nodded. Then his phone vibrated in his pocket. He froze. He didn't even remember giving anyone his number. He pulled it out with shaking fingers. No caller ID. Just a single notification, blank sender. A message. "Mom. Door." Izuku's blood went cold. He looked up, breathing hard. All Might saw his face change. "What is it?" All Might demanded. Izuku's voice came out broken. They mentioned my mother." Aizawa's eyes sharpened into something lethal. And for the first time since this began, Izuku saw a sliver of real anger under the tiredness. Not at Izuku. At whoever dared. Aizawa grabbed his radio. "Lock down Midoriya residence. Now. Send pro-heroes. Confirm." All Might's fist clenched. "I'll go." Aizawa's gaze snapped to him. "You can't move fast enough in." "I'll go anyway," All Might said, voice steel under thin lungs. Izuku's chest tightened. 2 crises. One at the gates. One at his home. And the hourglass had positioned both like chess pieces. Scene 4, the gate opens without a door. 1547. The incident outside the gates escalated instantly, like it had been waiting for the clock to catch up. A scream cracked across the campus perimeter. Then another. Security cameras on Power Loa. DUR's monitors showed the outer road. A delivery van stopped at a weird angle, smoke spilling from the hood like someone had staged it for drama. A small crowd had gathered, civilians, students from other departments, staff. Then a figure stepped onto the van roof. Mask. Ordinary build. Hands in pockets. Not Shigaraki. Not Kurogiri. Someone new. He raised one hand and the crowd flinched as if the air had teeth. A hostage, just one at first, was dragged into view by a thug. A knife flashed. And then, like a magician revealing a trick, the masked figure did nothing at all. No quirk flash. No explosion. No sound. Yet the screen glitched. Not camera glitch, Izuku could feel it through the monitor like a headache with direction. A thin hourglass symbol briefly appeared on the van's windshield. Then vanished. Bakugo, watching from the classroom window, whispered like he couldn't stop himself. Tick. Izuku's stomach dropped. Because Bakugo wasn't guessing anymore. He was remembering the rhythm. Aizawa stepped forward, voice sharp. No one goes outside. Izuku's body screamed to move. To fix. To intervene. To rewind whatever was about to happen. His vision flickered, echoes piling up. A knife cutting. A hostage falling. A hostage living. Someone else dying instead. Izuku gritted his teeth. Sensei, he whispered, if someone dies out there and I don't. Aizawa's eyes locked onto him. You don't get to rewrite the world to avoid guilt, Aizawa said. The words hit like a slap. Izuku's breath shook. Aizawa's voice lowered, sharper. And you don't get to hand yourself to a predator because you think suffering makes you responsible for everything. Izuku's eyes stung. Outside, the masked figure lifted a finger. And the hostage's knees buckled, like their muscles forgot how to obey. Not paralysis. Not poison. Just timing stolen from their body. The hostage swayed, half falling. Izuku's chest tightened. That wasn't a normal quirk effect. That looked like someone had reached into the beat of a human body and shifted it out of sync. Like time lag made flesh. Izuku whispered, terrified. They're doing what's happening to me. Aizawa didn't deny it. He just said, deadly quiet. That's why you're not going out there alone. Scene 5, Anchor Event. The hostage slipped further. The thug holding them yanked them upright, knife pressing to throat. The masked figure tilted his head, almost curious. And then, on the monitor, another figure appeared at the edge of the crowd. A civilian. Just a man with a backpack, trying to back away. But his foot caught on the curb. He stumbled, and Izuku's vision exploded. A sharp echo forced itself into his skull. The man falling into the road. A car swerving. A chain reaction. 3 bodies. 5, 10. Izuku gasped, clutching his head. Aizawa swore under his breath. All Might thin form moved toward Izuku instinctively. Midoriya. Izuku's throat tightened. This was it. This was how the hourglass worked. Not by creating one crisis, but by stacking dependencies. One stumble becomes a car swerve, becomes a pileup, becomes an anchor event. Too many consequences to unwind cleanly. A line the world would resist. Izuku's hands shook violently. He could stop the stumble. One small correction. But corrections were ripples. Ripples could cut someone else. And if it became anchor heavy, rewinding would kick back. Paradox shockwave. Echo sickness spreading. People remembering deaths that never happened. Izuku stared at the monitor, trembling. Aizawa's voice snapped. Midoriya. Breathe. Izuku inhaled. The air felt like glass. He looked at Aizawa. I can prevent it. Izuku whispered. Aizawa's eyes hardened. You can try. Izuku flinched at the phrasing. Aizawa stepped closer, low enough only Izuku could hear. If you step into that, you're playing their game, Aizawa said. They want you to hit an anchor and break. Izuku swallowed hard. And if I don't, Izuku whispered, people get hurt. Aizawa's gaze didn't soften. Hero's axe. PT that you can't stop every falling domino, he said. Izuku's eyes stung. Then Uraraka spoke behind them, voice shaking but clear. Midoriya, she said softly, I saw the chalk thing. I saw the USJ thing. If you go, you'll do it even if it kills you. Sue nodded, eyes serious. Ribbit, you'll sacrifice yourself. That's what you do. Iida stepped forward, jaw tight. You are a classmate. If you act with coordination, not alone. Quote. Bakugo's laugh was sharp and bitter. He'll go anyway. Izuku's chest tightened, and then the monitor flickered. Just once. The hourglass symbol flashed again. And a new message appeared. Faint and quick, like it was written between frames. Choose. Izuku's vision tunneled. His heart hammered. This wasn't a test of strength. It was a test of ethics. Of weth. He'd betray his own rules to satisfy the part of him that believed a hero should be able to fix everything. Izuku's mouth trembled. He whispered, almost inaudible. I feel the hook. Aizawa's eyes sharpened instantly. Izuku forced the words out, louder, obeying the new freeze coming. Aizawa moved like a switch flipped. He grabbed Izuku's shoulder and yanked him backward while snapping his ska. RF out in a protective arc, like he could physically block time from grabbing him. All Might stepped in close too, bracing. Uraraka's hands flew to her mouth. The air tightened. The room went still. But this time, the freeze didn't fully take. It shuddered. Like something tried to lock them and failed because too many eyes were prepared. Power loader's monitors screamed with alerts. Aizawa's hair lifted. All Might's jaw clenched. And the freeze snapped off with a violent recoil. A mini shockwave that made everyone's ears ring. Students stumbled. Uraraka grabbed the desk. Sue's pupils widened. Mineta yelped. Izuku staggered. Bleeding again. And on the monitor, outside the gates. The backpack man's foot caught the curb. He began to fall. Izuku's body lunged forward instinctively. Aizawa's scarf snapped around his waist, yanking him back. No, Aizawa barked. Izuku screamed through the pain and fear. Let me. Aizawa's eyes were steel. If you go, Aizawa said, voice shaking with controlled force, you give them your edge. And then you give them your friends. Izuku froze. Because Aizawa wasn't talking about metaphor. He was talking about paradox shockwaves ripping through a crowd. About people remembering multiple deaths. About someone learning how to weaponize that memory. Izuku's breath hitched. Outside the gates, the man hit the ground hard. And the car that was about to swerve didn't. Because a pro-hero on the road, one of the extra patrols Aizawa had ordered, grabbed the man's backpack strap at the last second and yanked him upright. The domino stopped. Not by time, by preparation, by teamwork, by the thing Izuku kept forgetting existed because chronoshift made him feel alone. Other people can save too. Izuku's knees almost buckled. He sucked in a shaky breath. Aizawa's scarf loosened slightly. And on the monitor, the masked figure on the van tilted his head. Even through the grainy feed, Izuku felt the smile. The figure raised one hand. Not waving, not threatening. Just acknowledging. Like, good, you didn't bite. Then the feed glitched and the hourglass symbol filled the screen for one heartbeat. A final message appeared. Next time, I won't ask. Tick. The screen returned. The masked figure was gone. The hostage situation dissolved into chaos as authorities rushed in, confused by the sudden disappearance of the instigator. But Izuku couldn't breathe. Becca. Use the hourglass had just proven something terrifying. They weren't trying to win today. They were calibrating. They were learning how to pull him toward anchors without letting him touch them. They were teaching him that they could create a crisis anywhere. And that he would always feel responsible. Aizawa stared at the monitors, eyes narrowed. All Might, he said quietly, they're steering him. All Might's face was grim. Then we stop them before the next push. Izuku stood shaking, blood on his lip, eyes burning. He whispered the truth that tasted like steel. They're going to make it personal. And somewhere far away, in a quiet lab where people collected impossible things, a cold smile likely sharpened. Because the trap in the timeline had finally snapped shut. Scene 1, Debrief, the domino map. UA didn't celebrate, no casualties. They treated it like a narrow miss that proved something worse. In the same underground annex where Izuku had nearly shattered himself against an anchor. Power loader rewound camera feeds frame by frame. Aizawa stood with arms folded, eyes dry and sharp. All Might, thin form, watched without blinking, jaw tight like he was biting down on panic. On the monitor, the van. The hostage. The masked figure. And the hourglass symbol, appearing for a heartbeat like a blink that meant something. Power loader zoomed in. It's not a digital overlay. The say, NSOR array recorded a synchronized latency spike when the symbol appeared. Like the cameras, and the air, were forced to agree on a single moment. Aizawa's gaze narrowed. They didn't hack the cameras. They hacked the moment the cameras were allowed to see. All Might exhaled slowly. They're not just sending messages. They're demonstrating access. Power loader brought up another graph. The annex freeze from the controlled rewind test. The curve looked like a heartbeat flatlining and returning. Same signature, power loader muttered. Different location. Different time. Same, handshake. Zawa turned his head slightly toward Izuku, who sat on a bench with gauze under his nose, hands clenched so tight his knuckles were pale. That message, Aizawa said, voice flat. Bring your edge. Izuku swallowed. They wanted me outside. They wanted you to push, Aizawa corrected. Toward an anchor, toward paradox feedback, toward collapse. All Might's eyes hardened. And they used your mother as a lever. Power loader's claws tapped the console faster. We deployed units to Midoriya residence the moment we got the text. Patrol confirmed. No forced entry, no suspicious movement. Aizawa cut in. Which means it wasn't a fake threat. Power loader paused. It wasn't. Aizawa's eyes narrowed like a blade turning. It was a timed probe. They wanted to see who we send. How fast. How we prioritize. All Might's breath came slow. They're building a profile of our responses. Izuku's stomach turned. Aizawa leaned closer, voice low enough it felt like a secret weapon being drawn. Then we do the one thing predators hate. Aizawa said. All Might looked at him. Unpredictability. Aizawa nodded once. We stop reacting like a school. We start reacting like prey that learned how to bite back. Izuku's mouth went dry. What does that mean? Aizawa's eyes didn't soften. It means, he said, we assume they're already touching the timeline around you. Scene 2, home visit, the poster lies. All Might arrived at Izuku's apartment complex in his thin form, coat pulled tight, cap low. He didn't like being here looking like this. He didn't like thinking about villains walking the same stairwell where a kid ate dinner and tried to do homework. Inko opened the door after the first knock. Her face went pale instantly. All Might. Is Izuku? Toshinori's voice was gentle, controlled. Midoriya Inko, I'm sorry to come unannounced. Your son is safe. Inko exhaled shakily like her lungs had been locked for days. Then she noticed the seriousness, the way Toshinori's eyes kept flicking down the hallway. Scanning angles like a soldier. Safe, she repeated, smaller. But something happened. Toshinori stepped inside. The apartment smelled like tea and warm rice and normal life pretending it wasn't fragile. He hated that he might be about to break it. We received a threat, he said carefully. We believe someone may target your family to get to him. Inko's hands flew to her mouth. Target. Toshinori held up a hand gently. We have heroes nearby. You are not alone. Inko's eyes shined with fear. Is it because he finally got a quirk? He's always wanted. Toshinori's chest tightened. He nodded once. Because the truth was worse than anything she could imagine. It's because your son is important, he said softly. And some people collect important things. Inko's knees went weak. She grabbed the doorframe. Toshinori moved toward the living room window without thinking, habit, training, instinct. The sill was clean. Too clean. No dust. No grit. No faint marks of a hurried hand. But there, barely visible in the light, was a single smear like someone had wiped condensation. Like a symbol had been written and then erased. Toshinori's stomach tightened. He didn't see the hourglass. But he could feel the violation in the air. We're going to increase your protection, he said. And, we may ask you to relocate temporarily. Inko swallowed hard. Relocate? Where? Toshinori's eyes flicked toward the hallway again. Somewhere safer, he said. And then the apartment clock on the wall skipped. Just once. The second hand jerked forward an extra tick. Toshinori froze. Because the clock hadn't malfunctioned. Time had. Scene 3, Intruder, the man who steals seconds. The air behind Toshinori thickened. Not fog. Not warp. Something subtler. Like the world held its breath. Inko flinched. What? A voice came from the hallway, calm and polite in a way that made it disgusting. Don't scream, it said. You'll waste time. A figure stepped into view. Not Shigaraki. Not Kurogiri. A man in a simple, dark jacket with a plain mask, featureless except for a thin hourglass line etched across the cheek like a scar that wasn't skin deep. He walked like he wasn't afraid. Like everyone else was moving at his speed. Toshinori's body reacted instantly, he surged forward. And his muscles lagged. Not paralysis. A fraction of delay between intention and motion. Just enough to make him feel old. Just enough to make him feel breakable. The masked man tilted his head. Ah, so the symbol came himself. Inko stumbled backward, eyes wide. All Might. Toshinori. I forced his arm to move despite the lag, stepping between Inko and the intruder like a shield that refused to admit it was cracked. Who are you? Toshinori demanded. The man's voice stayed calm. Almost conversational. Call me, second hand, he said. I borrow moments from people who don't deserve to keep them. Toshinori's eyes narrowed. You're here for the boy. Second hand's head tilted slightly. He's fascinating. Toshinori felt his blood go cold. Second hand continued, voice mild. He's trying so hard to be good. Trying so hard not to rewrite. But the world wants him to pay. Inko's breath hitched. What are you talking about? Izuku. Second hand glanced at her like she was furniture. You, he said softly, are leverage. Inko choked on a sound. Toshinori lunged again, forcing his body through the lag with sheer will, and swung. Second hand didn't dodge fast. He dodged early. Like he saw the movement arrive before it existed. Toshinori's fist passed through empty air. Second hand's fingers flicked outward. And Toshinori's vision stuttered. A micro freeze. Not full lock. Just enough that Toshinori's injured side screamed like it had been struck. Second hand leaned close, voice quiet. You feel it, don't you? He murmured. That drag. That latency. Imagine living like that all the time. Toshinori gritted his teeth. You're not touching him. Second hand's posture remained relaxed. Oh, he said. Almost amused, I already have. Scene 4, Echo at UA, the scream that hasn't happened yet. At the exact moment second hand spoke those words, Izuku jerked upright in the annex. His heart slammed into his ribs like it was trying to escape. He saw it. Not a vague flash. Not a chalk snap echo. A full, vivid scene. His mother's apartment. All Might's thin form turning. A shadow in the hallway. His mother's hand reaching for the doorframe. And blood on the floor that wasn't there yet. Izuku gasped so hard his throat burned. The hook hit his chest like a fist. He didn't think. He obeyed Aizawa's rule. Involuntary freeze. Izuku shouted, voice cracking. Home. My mom. Aizawa moved instantly. All Might, the one at UA, snapped his head up, then flinched like the word, home, had become a weapon. Power Loader swore and slammed keys. Aizawa grabbed Izuku's shoulders hard. Breathe. Stay here. Izuku shook violently. He's there. Someone's there. Aizawa's eyes turned deadly. Toshinori's already there. Izuku's breath hitched. That should have comforted him. It didn't. Because his echo hadn't shown victory. It had shown a moment that wanted to become anchor heavy. Izuku's mouth trembled. He could fix it. He could rewind something. Anything. He could. Aizawa's grip tightened, voice low and brutal. Midoriya, Aizawa said, if you rewind blind, you feed them. You don't know what they want you to change. Izuku's eyes stung. But my mom. All Might's voice cut in, calm but steel-lined. If you trust anyone, All Might said, trust me. Izuku's chest heaved. He didn't rewind. He sat inside the present like it was a burning room, watching a fire he couldn't put out. And that restraint hurt worse than any nosebleed. Scene 5, the fight in the hallway. Back at the apartment, Toshinori forced his breathing steady, fighting the lag like it was a weight strapped to his bones. Second hand raised his palm. The air pulsed. Not a full freeze. A selective lag, targeted. Toshinori felt his injured muscles hesitate again, a cruel reminder of what he used to be. Second hand's voice stayed pleasant. I don't want to kill you, he said. That would be wasteful. Inko made a broken sound. Please, please. Second hand didn't look at her. He walked forward instead. And Toshinori understood instantly. He wasn't trying to win with strength. He was trying to force a choice. Let him pass, or expose something worse. Toshinori's jaw clenched. He moved. Not as All Might. As Toshinori Yagi, thin, damaged, stubborn. He stepped in front of Second Hand again. Second Hand paused like that was mildly interesting. You'll break, Second Hand said softly. Toshinori's voice was hoarse. Maybe. Then he did the one thing Second Hand hadn't planned for. He grabbed the hallway clock off the wall and threw it. Not at Second Hand's body. At Second Hand's space. The clock shattered against the wall beside him, glass exploding, gears scattering. Second Hand flinched, just a tiny reaction. Not pain. Surprise. Because the attack wasn't about hitting him. It was about filling the corridor with unpredictable fragments and noise, things his early dodge couldn't perfectly map. Toshinori surged forward in that fraction of uncertainty and slammed his shoulder into Second Hand, driving him back. Second Hand hit the wall hard. His calm cracked for the first time. Clever, he hissed. Toshinori pressed him there, trembling with effort. Leave, Toshinori growled. Second Hand's mask tilted. I didn't come to take her, he murmured. Toshinori's blood went colder. Then why? Second Hand's fingers flicked. The air shuddered. And on the wall, in the dust of shattered clock glass, an hourglass symbol briefly formed, perfect, clean, smug. Second Hand whispered. I came to prove I can stand in his home. Quote. Toshinori felt rage flare, hot, protective, murderous. Second Hand's voice softened again. Tell the boy, he murmured, that I can make anchor moments out of ordinary mornings. Then he stepped backward. And for a fraction of a second, Toshinori's body lagged again, just enough. Second Hand slipped past the edge of the hallway like he'd never been there. Not warp. Not smoke. Just, gone. As if he had stolen the second needed to leave. The corridor stayed silent. Inko sobbed once, sharp and terrified. Toshinori's hands shook as he turned to her. You're safe, he said, voice breaking. You're safe. Inko stared at him, trembling. What is happening to my son? Toshinori swallowed hard. The world noticed him, he whispered. And that was the cruelest sentence he had ever spoken in a normal apartment. Scene 6, Relocation. That evening, Toshinori returned to UA with his coat torn and his expression darker than Izuku had ever seen. Aizawa lisped. And in silence as Toshinori reported what happened. Second hand. The lag. The clock. The message. When Toshinori finished, Aizawa didn't sigh. He didn't rub his eyes. He simply said, dorms. Power load already. Aizawa's eyes were flat. Tonight. Izuku flinched. Dorms. But my mom. All Might's gaze softened painfully. She will be protected, he promised. But you can't stay in a place they've already proven they can enter. Izuku's throat tightened. Moving meant admitting he wasn't normal. Moving meant dragging his mother into a hero's nightmare. But staying meant second hand returning. And next time, not just to prove something. Aizawa's voice cut clean through Izuku's spiraling. This isn't punishment, he said. It's survival. Izuku swallowed hard and nodded, eyes stinging. Yes, sir. Aizawa turned away, already issuing orders like the future was something he could bully into behaving. But Izuku kept hearing second hand's calm voice in his skull. I can make anchor moments out of ordinary mornings. And that meant the next push wouldn't be a van outside the gates. It would be breakfast, a phone call, a doorbell, anything small enough to look harmless. Until it wasn't. Scene 7, tick. That night, in UA's newly prepared dorm room, Izuku sat on his bed with his logbook open. He wrote with trembling hands. Entry, home intrusion. Hourglass agent, second hand, access. D. Midoriya residence without conventional breach. Observed effect. Biological timing theft, latency manipulation on All Might. Stated intent. Prove presence, psychological pressure. Impli. Ed capability. Fabricate anchor weight events from mundane triggers. His pen paused. He stared at the page until the words blurred. Then, softly, from the corner of his vision, the air shimmered. Not a full freeze. Not a lock. Just a thin, sick stutter. And on the dorm window glass, condensation formed in the shape of an hourglass again. Two triangles touching. Under it, one word appeared, calm, patient, certain. Tomorrow. Izuku's breath hitched. Then the writing changed. A time, 7:03. And one final line, don't be late. The symbol vanished. The window returned to normal. The room stayed silent. Izuku sat perfectly still, heart hammering, realizing the worst truth of all. They weren't chasing him anymore. They were scheduling him. Tick. Scene 1, dorm morning, knife quiet. UA's dorms were supposed to feel safer. Thicker walls. More cameras. Patrols that never slept. A building designed to keep danger outside. But on the morning labeled 7:03, the dorm felt like a held breath. Izuku woke before his alarm. He lay still, staring at the ceiling, listening to the tiny noises of a building waking up, pipes settling, distant footsteps, someone's shower running. His body didn't feel rested. It felt ready, like a bruise waiting for the next hit. He checked the clock on his nightstand. 6:41, 22 minutes. He sat up slowly and opened his logbook. He didn't write. He just stared at the last message. Tomorrow. 7:03. Don't be late. The words had been a command, but also a taunt. Meet me. Obey me. Prove you can't ignore me. Izuku swallowed hard. He slid out of bed and quietly dressed, trying to keep his movements normal. He couldn't wake the rest of the class. He couldn't cause panic. But the urge to warn someone, anyone, ate at him like hunger. Aizawa's rule echoed in his head. You don't resist alone. You say it out loud. So he did. He stepped into the hallway and tapped Aizawa's number with shaking fingers. It rang once, twice. Aizawa answered like he'd never been asleep. Speak. Izuku's voice came out hoarse. The hourglass left another message. It says 7:03. Aizawa didn't ask how. He didn't ask where. He simply said, stay in your room. Lock the door. Do not move unless I tell you. Izuku's chest tightened. But Aizawa cut him off. That's an order. Izuku swallowed. Yes, sir. He returned to his room and sat on the edge of his bed, hands clenched, staring at the clock like it was a bomb. 6:58. 5 minutes. He heard footsteps in the hallway, heavy, purposeful. Aizawa. He heard another set, lighter, but confident. All Might. He heard the soft scrape of Omething metal against the floor, power loader's claws. They were here. They were ready. And somehow that scared Izuku more, because it meant even the adults believed this time was real. 7:02. Izuku's mouth went dry. He whispered to the air, like talking to time itself. Fine. Scene 2, the second hand walks in. 7:03. The dorm lights flickered once. Not a blackout. A deliberate blink. The air tightened in Izuku's chest, the hook. His vision sharpened with that sick clarity that meant reality was about to be edited. Then, a knock. Not frantic. Not loud. 3 calm taps. Right on his door. Izuku froze. His body screamed, "Don't open it." But the sound wasn't coming from the hallway. It was coming from inside the room. Like the door itself was producing the knock for him. 3 taps again. All Might's voice came through the door. Low and tense. "Midoriya, don't move." Aizawa's voice followed, sharper. "We're outside. Do not open it." Izuku's breath shook. Then the door handle turned. Slowly. Gently. As if someone had a key. As if locks were just suggestions. Izuku's hands clenched. He didn't touch the handle. But the door opened anyway. A thin crack. Then wider. And there he was. Second hand. Plain mask. Dark jacket. That etched hourglass line like a signature. He stepped into the room like he had permission. Like he'd been invited by the clock. Izuku's stomach flipped. Outside, A's scarf snapped and whipped under the door gap like a serpent trying to bite through space. It hit nothing. Second hand looked toward the door, almost amused. "Erasure doesn't work on me," Second hand said calmly. "I'm not a quirk in the conventional sense." All Might's voice thundered from the hall, thin form voice, but full of fury. "Get away from him." Second hand didn't flinch. He turned back to Izuku. "Good morning," he said politely. "You were on time." Izuku's throat tightened. "Why are you here?" Second hand tilted his head. "To collect a second." Izuku's pulse spiked. Second hand stepped closer, slow, casual. "Your teachers think they can trap me," he said. "So I brought you a lesson instead." Izuku's vision flickered. Echoes stacked. Second hand touching his forehead. Second hand touching his chest. Second hand leaving. Second hand never leaving. Izuku swallowed hard. "What do you want?" Second hand's voice softened, almost kind. "I want you to stop pretending you're a hero who can live inside the present." He murmured. Izuku's jaw clenched. "I am." Second hand chuckled. "No." He lifted his hand. Izuku felt the air ripple, not a freeze, but a lag, like his body was being delayed from the inside. Second hand whispered, "Show me your edge." Scene 3, Anchor Test. Outside the room, Aizawa made a decision. "Breach," he snapped. The door exploded inward, not from a blast quirk, but from raw force, All Might in muscle form for a single instant, shoulder ramming through like a hurricane, then shrinking back with a cough that stained his hand. Aizawa surged in behind him, scarf whipping. Power loader's claws clanked as he followed, dragging equipment. Second hand didn't panic. He didn't run. He only turned slightly, like the heroes were part of the schedule too. "All of you," Second hand said calmly, "are very attached to continuity." All Might lunged. Second hand flicked his fingers. All Might's motion lagged mid-step, his body hesitating like it forgot which frame came next. Aizawa's scarf snapped toward Second hand's throat. Second hand stepped aside early, not fast. Early. Like he had already watched the scarf cross that space. Izuku's heart hammered. Second hand wasn't dodging the present. He was dodging the intent behind it. Power loader slammed a device onto the floor, something like a portable sensor pillar. It emitted a low hum. Second hand glanced at it. "Cute." Then his "Gaz, you," he said softly, "are the only one who can interact with me in my language." Izuku's hands trembled. All Might gritted his teeth, voice hoarse. "Midoriya, don't." Second hand smiled under the mask. "He will." Quote. And Izuku realized the trap. If Izuku did nothing, Second hand could keep lagging the heroes until someone got hurt. If Izuku used Chronoshift, Second hand go. Exactly what he wanted. Proof of the edge, a paradox attempt, maybe an anchor collision. Either way, Second hand controlled the outcome. Second hand lifted his hand again. All Might's chest jerked, like his breath arrived late. Aizawa's eyes widened for the first time. His fingers twitched at his scarf, trying to move faster than lag allowed. Izuku's vision exploded with echoes. All Might collapsing. Aizawa lunging and missing. Second hand stepping forward. Second hand touching Izuku. Izuku gasped, clutching his head. And in that burst of futures, one possibility burned bright. Anchor. Second. Hand was trying to force Izuku to rewind beyond the line. To create paradox shock. To spread echo sickness through the dorm. To turn the building into a memory plague. Izuku's breath shook. He looked at Aizawa. Aizawa's eyes locked on him. Dead serious. Aizawa mouthed one word. No. Izuku swallowed hard. Then he did something he hadn't done before. He didn't rewind. He didn't freeze. He didn't accelerate. He spoke. Second hand. Izuku said, voice trembling but clear, you're afraid of something. Second hand paused. A fraction. That fraction was everything. All Might's fist tightened. Aizawa's scarf twitched. Second hand tilted his head. Am I? Izuku forced himself to keep talking, even as his body trembled with the hook in his chest. You keep pushing me to the edge, Izuku said. You keep asking me to break rules. You keep trying to make me hit an anchor. Second hand's silence felt like a blade drawn halfway. Izuku continued anyway. Because you can't cross it either. Second hand froze, just a micro freeze. Not time lock, but stillness of attention. Izuku's heart hammered. He pressed forward. You're not here to collect a second, Izuku said. You're here because you need me to open a door you can't open. The air in the room felt colder. Second hand's voice came softer. Interesting. Izuku swallowed. The hourglass isn't one person, is it? Second hand didn't answer. That was answer enough. Aizawa's scarf snapped forward. Second hand stepped back, early again, but this time his timing was slightly off. Because he wasn't reading attack patterns. He was reading Izuku's decisions. And Izuku had just changed the shape of the moment. Scene 4, the first team rewind. Second hand raised his palm. The lag slammed harder into All Might, his body buckling, breath catching, injured side screaming. Aizawa's eyes flared red. Midoriya. Izuku's chest hooked violently. He felt chronoshift surge, desperate, reactive. Not to save himself. To save them. He heard his own voice from earlier chapters, like a ghost. If you can undo any mistake, does it remove the pressure to act decisively? Izuku clenched his jaw. He made a decision. Not a panic rewind. A controlled one. And for the first time. He warned everyone. Rewind, 3 seconds. Izuku shouted. Aizawa's eyes widened. All Might's gaze snapped to him. Power Loader's claws gripped the floor. Izuku whispered, go back. Reality snapped. 3 seconds rewound like a rubber band pulled and released. All Might's buckling posture reset. Upright again, breath intact. Aizawa's scarf returned to a half swing. Second hand's palm lowered again. But this time, they remembered. Not fully. But enough. All Might used the second of pre-knowledge to shift his stance. Aizawa altered his scarf trajectory mid-launch. Power Loader triggered his device a fraction earlier. Second hand's eyes narrowed behind the mask. Ah, he murmured. So you can share it when you announce it. Aizawa's scarf wrapped around second hand's wrist. For one glorious moment, contact happened. All Might surged forward, fist aimed not to kill, but to pin. Second hand's calm finally cracked. He didn't fight back with strength. He did something worse. He stole the second the scarf needed to tighten. The scarf loosened, like it's not forgot to exist. All Might's fist cut through empty air again. Second hand stepped back, breathing controlled. Then he looked at Izuku. You just proved something, he said softly. Izuku's stomach dropped. Second hand continued. You can rewind with consent, and imprint multiple minds, without breaking them. All Might's eyes widened. Midoriya. Aizawa's gaze sharpened, horrified. Because that meant the hourglass wasn't just hunting Izuku's edge. It was hunting Izuku's ability to share time safely. A weapon not of seconds, but of teams. Second hand's voice was almost reverent. That's what we needed, he murmured. Scene 5, the hourglass door. The room flickered. Not a full freeze. A layered shimmer, like multiple time locks trying to stack and failing. The hourglass symbol appeared on the wall behind second hand. Not written. Projected through reality. Second hand stepped beneath it like a priest under an altar. He lifted his hand toward the symbol. And for the first time, Izuku felt something truly alien. A presence. Not a person. A structure. Like a machine made of moments. Second hand spoke gently, almost lovingly. Now we know how to open you. Izuku's chest tightened. Open, what? Second hand's head tilted. The hourglass isn't a symbol, he whispered. It's a lock. All Might stepped forward, voice shaking with fury. What are you doing? Second hand didn't look at him. He looked only at Izuku. You have an edge, he said. A boundary the world enforces. Izuku's stomach dropped. Second hand continued, calm. When you push it, reality kicks back. Paradox shock. Echo sickness. Izuku's hands trembled. Second hand's voice softened. If we guide that kick into the right shape, he murmured, it becomes a key. Izuku's blood went ice cold. They didn't want him to break. They wanted him to unlock something by breaking the right way. Aizawa moved, scarf snapping again. But the air hooked tight. A partial freeze trembled into existence. Izuku couldn't move. All Might couldn't move. Power Loader couldn't move. Only Second Hand moved, slow and calm, stepping backward into the hourglass shimmer. He left one last sentence behind like a nail hammered into Izuku's skull. Tomorrow's lesson was simple. The hourglass symbol brightened. Second Hand's voice, fading. Next time, we'll take the class. And then he was gone. No fog. No portal. Just absence. Like the second needed to leave had been stolen from the room. The freeze snapped off. Sound returned. All Might stumbled, coughing hard. Aizawa's scarf whipped uselessly through empty air. Izuku stood shaking, heart hammering, eyes wide. Because, take the class, didn't mean kidnapping. Not necessarily. It could mean something worse. A forced time lock spreading across multiple people. Echo sickness weaponized. Memory bleed turned into a bomb. All Might grabbed Izuku's shoulders, voice raw. Midoriya, he said, listen to me. Izuku's breath shook. He said, I know. All Might snapped, then gentled himself. We'll protect them. We will. Aizawa's eyes were darker than Izuku had ever seen. We don't wait, Aizawa said. Power Loader nodded shakily. We can track the distortion signature, maybe triangulate. Aizawa cut in. Do it. Izuku stared at the spot where Second Hand had stood. His mind replayed the words. You can share it when you announce it. That was the true discovery. That was what the hourglass wanted. Not Izuku alone. Izuku is a broadcast. A transmitter of rewinds. A person who could make others remember what didn't of it. Izuku's hands clenched. Tick. Thanks for watching guys. Hope you all are enjoyed this video. So let's end this video here. Until then, see you in next video. Then he.